Chapter 599. Let's try again. Unable to think of a reason, Gray decided to give it another try. This time, he was going to choose a powerful blood fiend as his test subject. A pair of greenish-black wings sprouted from his back. Gray flew into the sky in search of a suitable blood fiend for his test. With his current strength, the most suitable test subject would naturally be a magic light level blood fiend. However, blood fiends of this level would be impossible to find, so he could only settle for a king-level blood fiend. About 100 miles into the Red Leaf Forest, Gray finally found a king-level blood fiend. It was a gigantic beast about 14 to 15 meters long. Its body was wide and extremely bloated. When it moved, it looked like a squirming hill. It had no hair on its body, and its entire body was golden, as if it had been poured with gold. On the head of the gigantic beast, there was a sharp horn shaped like a scimitar. It also looked as if it had been poured with gold, and it was several meters long. It looked extremely sharp. This was a blood fiend that Gray had never seen in books before. Even with his vast knowledge of blood fiends, he could not guarantee that he would be able to recognize all of them. Roar! The golden beast had discovered Gray. In order to save time, Gray did not hide his whereabouts. Thus, when Gray discovered the gigantic beast, the golden beast had also discovered Gray. It roared at the sky, and an earth-shattering pressure came down on Gray. It wanted to frighten Gray, who was flying in the sky, and make him fall down. It was very familiar with this method of exerting pressure because it had done this many times before. Each time, it was able to reap delicious rewards. It had eaten everything that was running on the ground, and occasionally it would eat those that were flying in the sky. It immediately felt delicious. Bang! Gray retracted his greenish-black wings and fell straight to the ground, creating a crater. Naturally, he did not fall from the sky because of the gold-tier beast's aura. Even the aura of a magic light-tier beast could not intimidate him, let alone the aura of a king-tier, gold-tier beast. The reason he did this was because he wanted to observe the changes in the gold-tier beast after it was attacked by the purple light. Dong, dong, dong. Naturally, the giant golden beast did not know what Gray was thinking. When it saw that Gray had fallen under the pressure, it was instantly excited. It moved its thick legs, causing the ground to tremble as it rushed towards Gray. Gray's face was calm as he looked at the charging golden behemoth. The golden behemoth's huge body gradually became clearer in Gray's eyes. When it was only a few dozen meters away from Gray, the golden behemoth was so excited that it opened its mouth wide, revealing its white teeth. A foul stench filled the air, and sticky saliva flowed out. The golden behemoth was already reminiscing about the smell of prey that had fallen from the sky. However, it did not know that the person standing before it was not prey, but a hunter. Gray extended his right index finger, and a ball of purple light the size of a basketball appeared in front of his index finger. He thought for a moment, and then reduced the size of the purple light by half. He then shot the purple light at the golden giant beast that was only a few dozen meters away from him. Whoosh! A flash of purple light flashed past at a speed faster than lightning and hit the golden behemoth's body. The golden behemoth did not even see what it was before it was hit by the purple light. After being hit by the purple light, the golden behemoth's body that was charging towards Gray suddenly stopped and became completely stiff. However, under the strong impact of the purple light, the golden behemoth was still charging towards Gray. With a distance of a few dozen meters, Gray could clearly see all the changes that happened to the golden behemoth after being hit by the purple light. The golden behemoth's huge body was shriveling, and there were many wrinkles on its body. Finally, its huge body became thinner, and there were many wrinkles on its body. Its body was like a ball of sponge that had been squeezed until it was wrinkled. Its black beast eyes that were originally sharp and emitting a ferocious aura quickly became turbid, and the black was filled with a grayish-white color. Boom! The golden behemoth fell in front of Gray and slid towards him. Gray's index finger lightly touched the golden behemoth's body and immediately stopped it. Clang! Because Gray had deliberately weakened the power of the attack, the golden behemoth did not die. Looking at Gray, who was close by, it trembled and struggled to stand up. However, just as it stood up, it fell down powerlessly. Its four legs could no longer support its body. This was a golden behemoth that had reached the end of its life. This was the evaluation that anyone who saw this scene would give. However, not long ago, the golden behemoth's smooth golden skin and sharp eyes were definitely in the prime of its life. It has indeed lost a lot of its life force. Gray circled the golden behemoth and sized it up. He confirmed that the golden behemoth had indeed lost a lot of its life force under the purple light. It had gone from prime to prime in an instant. The purple light's ability is really to deprive life. From the golden behemoth's reaction after being attacked, the purple light had indeed caused the golden behemoth to lose a lot of its life force. However, he still had doubts about the purple light's ability to deprive life. This was because this ability could not explain the extreme speed that the purple light gave him. Deprive life? Extreme speed? Two different abilities flashed back and forth in Gray's mind. Suddenly, Gray's eyes burst with light and his breathing became slightly heavier. He spoke with a slightly excited voice. I know what ability it is. Time ability. That's right, it must be the ability of time. The ability of time, the mysterious ability to control time, was rumored to be an ability that did not even exist. Only this ability could explain the ability to deprive life and extreme speed at the same time. The lives that the trees and the golden behemoth lost were not taken away. Instead, they were lost naturally after experiencing hundreds or even thousands of years in an instant. The extreme speed that he gained after being enveloped by the purple light was due to the ability of time. It made the time around him faster, making the time around him faster. To put it simply, when he used the purple light to envelop his body, he might have experienced a few seconds of time, but only 1 second had passed in the outside world. A few seconds of moving distance was compressed into 1 second. From the outside world's perspective, his speed was naturally increased by several times. I didn't expect the ability of time to really exist and to actually be mastered by me. Gray's eyes were full of excitement. The ability of time was definitely the most mysterious ability. Gray had read many books about this ability, but he only guessed that it might exist. He did not dare to guarantee it. But now his own experience had proven that this ability really existed. It really did exist. The ability of time, rather than calling it an ability, it's better to call a rule. This is no longer a simple ability, but more like a rule. All along, the abilities that Gray had come into contact with were traceable in nature. To be able to find them in nature, they were the most basic forms that constituted nature. Fire could be obtained by igniting firewood. Ice could be seen in winter. Wind could be seen everywhere. It was just that powerful winds were rarer, but it was not non-existent. Physical abilities such as strength, speed, and defense were all possessed by humans. The various abilities that he had encountered before could be found in nature, but the ability of time was different. It was illusory and untraceable. Rather than calling it an ability, it was better to call it a rule. If he really wanted to call it an ability, it would be called a time rule ability. And it was extremely difficult to produce this ability. It took a total of 5 abilities to finally evolve into this ability, which showed how difficult it was to produce it. He did not know if there were blood fiends with this ability, but even if there were, such blood fiends would definitely be extremely rare. Otherwise, the ability of time would not be called a legend. A rule ability formed by 5 abilities? Could it be that above ordinary abilities is a rule ability? The appearance of the ability of time made Gray suspicious. Abilities were also divided into different levels. The lowest level was ordinary, while the higher level was a rule ability formed by a mixture of various abilities. The altar of the Red Desert Palace of the Raging Flame Kingdom had an area of more than 1,000 square meters. Different from when Gray had first arrived, there were many rune patterns on the altar now. These rune patterns were all drawn with fresh blood, exuding a strange scarlet color. They twisted and connected with each other. Some were like winding vines, some were like some kind of blood fiend, and some were like huge eyes. The 4 people from the 5th Force all held rune brushes in their hands, dipped them in the refined blood, and quickly drew rune brushes. The rune brushes in their hands moved like dragons and snakes, drawing every single rune pattern with precision. If there were rune masters present at this time, they would definitely be shocked to find that the rune skills of these 4 people were far above theirs. In front of these 4 people, they did not dare to call themselves masters. Their skills were like rune apprentices in front of them. After drawing a rune and inserting the rune brush into the blood, the man with a goatee, Chaucer, looked at the 4 intertwined swords in the center and said, "At this rate, the 4 swords should be able to merge into one in at most a day. It's indeed much faster than expected. Originally, it was expected to take 3 days, but now it seems that it won't be necessary." Derek nodded slightly and said, "Let's move faster. We need to hurry and try to embed the blood sacrifice rune array into the origin formation before the merging is complete. I'm a bit worried that Grey Fergus will come and cause trouble again." He looked at Merrill. "Merrill, don't stop using the perception magic weapon. Be careful of Grey Fergus coming again. With the 4 of us magic light here, even if Grey Fergus comes, he won't be able to stop us. Besides, Grey Fergus doesn't know that the blood sacrifice will suck the entire plane dry. By the time he finds out, it'll be too late." Faust's expression was relaxed, and he didn't seem to care. Grey Fergus's strength is not simple. We can't be careless. Derek shook his head with a serious expression. "I understand. I'll keep the perception magic weapon activated. If someone comes close, I'll be able to sense it." Merrill's delicate face was serious and serious. Chapter 600. Grey, Your Excellency Grey, Fergus Castle. Because of the shocking news, the Fergus Castle was in chaos, and many people had gathered. There were members of the Fergus family, as well as important figures from close forces who had been brought over by Barnet Neame. Some were anxious, and some were skeptical of the news, but without exception, they all wanted to see Grey. However, Grey had already instructed everyone not to disturb him. So when Grey returned from the Red Leaf Forest and landed in Fergus Castle, a large group of people immediately surrounded him. Among them were members of the Fergus family, as well as Sophia, Francis, Dyphony Violet, and others. "Grey, is the news true?" Sophia, who was wearing a purple dress that outlined her perfect figure, had her purple hair draped behind her back, and her beautiful face was full of worry. "I think it's true." Glancing at Sophia, Grey said solemnly, "In fact, I've always had doubts in this regard. The destruction of the Empire 1,000 years ago was too thorough, as if it was hiding something, so I think this news is very likely to be true. I heard from the people you sent that you're preparing to evacuate this world." Dyphony Violet's wrinkled face was full of seriousness as she asked Grey. "Yes, I do have this plan. Of course, it's the worst-case scenario. If we can't stop the Fifth Force, the world's destruction is inevitable, and we can only evacuate this world." Grey nodded in a deep voice. "You're going to stop the Fifth Force? But now the Fifth Force should already have 4 magic light in charge." Francis looked at Grey in surprise. After receiving the news, it wasn't that they hadn't thought of stopping the Fifth Force, but when they thought that the Fifth Force might already have 4 magic light, they couldn't come up with any ideas at all. When there was a gap in strength, but the gap wasn't too big, one could still take the risk and fight. However, when the gap in strength was as big as a chasm, one couldn't even think of fighting. That was because it was like hitting a rock with an egg. There was no possibility of winning. No, there are already 4 magic light masters. I met the 5th faction a few hours ago, and all 4 of them are now in the realm of magic light. Grey's voice was heavy. "Then why are you still going?" Sophia looked worried. She was shocked, and heartbroken when she learned that the Fifth Force was preparing a blood sacrifice to destroy the world. However, she also knew that the Purple Moon Kingdom and the Jewel Kingdom were not strong enough to stop the Fifth Force. "I want to give it a try. Don't worry, although I might not be a match for them, I am confident that I can protect myself." Grey patted Sophia's shoulder with a reassuring look of confidence. "Sir Grey, I'll go with you." After pondering for a moment, Dyphony looked up at Grey and said, "Don't worry. Against the magic light, even if other people were king-tier warriors, their role was limited. Only someone like him, who had a gold-tier weapon and whose combat strength was comparable to magic light, could fight against magic light. It wasn't that he hadn't thought of giving the gold-tier weapon to Gray to increase his combat strength. He had tried it with Gray before. After reaching the level of magic light, the enhancement of a gold-tier weapon was greatly reduced. Under such circumstances, it was better for him, a thrice-transformed king tier, to keep the gold-tier weapon in his hands than to give it to Gray. Sir Diphone, that's too dangerous. With your defense, Gray shook his head in disagreement. With his powerful defense, Gray wasn't worried about his own safety. However, Diphone Violet was different. Although she had a gold-tier weapon that was comparable to magic light, her defense was still king tier. In the face of magic light, she could be seriously injured or even killed if she wasn't careful. Sir Gray, you don't have to persuade me. Diphone Violet interrupted Gray, her eyes filled with determination. As a member of the royal family who protects the kingdom, if I don't try and give up the territory and people that the royal family has protected for thousands of years, I will never forgive myself. Besides, I don't have many years left to live. Gray looked at Francis and the others, hoping that Francis and the others could persuade her. Indeed, it would be advantageous to have someone with magic light to share the burden. However, this operation was very dangerous. Diphone Violet could very well die in this battle. He didn't want to see someone throw their life away. Sir Diphone, seeing Gray's pleading gaze, Francis and the others tried to persuade her, but as soon as they spoke, they were forcefully interrupted by Diphone Violet. Say no more. This is my decision. Diphone Violet's dignified gaze swept over Francis and the others, a look of determination on her face. In the end, Gray agreed. The other party's will was unshakable. Even if he tried to persuade her, it would be useless. The only thing he could do was to respect the other party's decision. The altar of the palace in the Red Desert. The entire altar had been drawn with complicated red runes. From afar, it looked like a huge red patterned carpet. In the center of the altar, within the white pillar of light, for sword-shaped weapons had undergone huge changes compared to when Gray had first seen them. The sword-shaped weapon in the center had become extremely resplendent. The dazzling golden light was so dazzling that no one dared to look directly at it. The three sword-shaped weapons around it had dimmed and flickered. Kacha! 3 crisp sounds rang out. The golden light of the 3 sword-shaped weapons on the periphery dissipated, and they suddenly collapsed and completely disappeared. The sword-shaped weapon in the center had reached its most dazzling golden light, as if a sun was blooming. The fusion is complete. After drawing the runes for an entire day, Derek and the others had just finished drawing the runes. When they saw that 3 of the sword-shaped weapons had disappeared and only one was left, their eyes couldn't help but light up. Although there were 4 weapons in the planar origin formation, in reality, these 4 weapons came from the same source. They had been separated from a single weapon and were originally a whole. Therefore, before the blood sacrifice, they had to wait for the 4 weapons to fuse into one. Now that they had fused into one, they could naturally begin the blood sacrifice. Let's begin. Dennick took a deep breath and said with a serious expression. The 4 of them looked at each other and spread out to stand at the 4 corners of the altar. Then they knelt down on one knee and touched a note of the rune pattern with their right hand. The surging blood energy in their bodies surged into the rune pattern like a flood. The blood sacrifice runes required the infusion of at least 4 magic light masters' blood energy to activate. This was also the reason why the 5th faction was unwilling to fight to the death with the Purple Moon Kingdom and the Jewel Kingdom in the beginning. Although they believed that they would be the final winners in the end, it was very likely that the 2 kings who were still in the 3rd metamorphosis would die in the battle. This was absolutely not allowed, because if any of them died, they would not be able to activate the blood sacrifice runes. As the 4 of them poured their blood energy into the runes, the red runes on the altar emitted a demonic red light, as if countless blood mists were sprinkling down. For a moment, the blood-colored mist on the altar was hazy. As the runes on the altar lit up, the planar origin formations buried deep underground all over the 4 kingdoms lit up one by one. They were operating at full power or even overloaded. In the past, the plane's origin power had been slowly and steadily extracted, but now, the plane's origin power was being extracted violently, regardless of the cost. The plane origin energy that was originally on the verge of exhaustion was rapidly being extracted in such a violent manner. As the plane origin energy rapidly decreased, a formless change appeared in the entire world. Humans could not sense this change for the time being, but the blood fiends with their sharp senses had already sensed it. They became anxious, roaring, and going crazy. Sensing that the blood sacrifice runes were about to be activated, the 4 of them from the 5th faction let out a sigh of relief. As long as the blood sacrifice runes were activated, they would be declared a success. No one would be able to stop the blood sacrifice from proceeding. Not good. Someone's coming. Suddenly, Meryl's expression changed. Through the perception of her magic weapon, she could sense 2 figures rapidly approaching. One of them was even faster than the average Magic Light Master. Hold on. The blood sacrifice runes are about to be activated, Derek ordered in a deep voice. Not good, it's too late, Meryl shouted anxiously. Just as she shouted these words, a purple figure appeared beside Faust and swept a sword towards him. Pooh! Faust's figure was sent flying by this sword and crashed heavily outside the altar. A large portion of the buildings around the altar collapsed. Without the supply of Faust's blood energy, the blood sacrifice runes that had turned a demonic red suddenly dimmed and became completely silent. Grey Fergus, you're courting death. Derek stood up with a gloomy expression when he saw that the activation of the blood sacrifice runes had failed at the last moment. He looked at the figure shrouded in purple light with an ashen expression. Even though he was shrouded in purple light, he could still tell that this person was gray from his armor and figure. I'm going to kill you this time. Old Joe's eyes were filled with killing intent as his gaze locked on a Grey Fergus. He originally wanted to attack Grey after the 4 recovered their Magic Light Master's strength and kill Grey Fergus. However, he was forced to give up due to the importance of the mission and to avoid any accidents. Now that Grey Fergus had come to stop them, it would be impossible to activate the blood sacrifice runes without killing him. This was exactly what he wanted. You're the ones who should die. You actually plan to use the blood sacrifice world as a burial item to repair your magic weapon. Gray also looked at Derek with an ashen expression. At the same time, he sighed softly in his heart. A faint sense of uneasiness made him cancel his original plan and rush to the Red Desert in advance to stop the 5th Force. Fortunately, this was the case. Otherwise, the 5th Force would have succeeded. Although he didn't understand runic arrays, he could clearly see that the other party had activated a very terrifying runic array. It was very likely the runic array of the blood sacrifice world. Chapter 601. How did you find out? Derek's face was filled with suspicion and coldness. Apart from the 4 of them, Kylie was the only one who knew about the blood sacrifice. However, she hated the Purple Moon Kingdom and the Jewel Kingdom to the core. Logically speaking, she shouldn't have told the Purple Moon Kingdom and the Jewel Kingdom about this. Kylie told me. What do you think? You didn't expect her to tell me the enemy she hates to the core, did you? Gray looked at Derek with a mocking expression. Impossible. Kylie wants the Purple Moon Kingdom and the Jewel Kingdom to be destroyed. She would never tell you. Meryl frowned. Her intuition told her that Kylie might be the one who told Derek. However, she couldn't figure out why Kylie would tell Derek about this with her hatred for him. Of course, she wouldn't be kind enough to help us. She just wants to see me fight the 4 of you and die in your hands. Gray shook his head and sneered. Crazy woman. This crazy woman. So it was this crazy woman who ruined our plan. She told you about this because of this. We should have killed her. The killing intent in Chaucer's eyes was like a dark cloud that couldn't be dispelled. He wanted to kill Kylie even more than he wanted to kill Gray. Whoosh! Whoosh! At this moment, 2 figures appeared on the altar at the same time. One of them had an old face and held a battle sword that looked like it was made of gold. It was Diphony Violet. The other person was Faust, who had just been sent flying by Gray's sword. There was a deep wound on his waist, and dark red blood was dripping down. Damn you, damn you. He looked at Gray with an ashen face. Gray's sneak attack had come so suddenly that he had no time to defend himself. He had taken a sword strike, and the injury he had received was not light. Faust, what happened to you? Seeing Faust return, Derek and the others looked over. In the next moment, all three of them couldn't help but be shocked. What do you mean, what happened? Being stared at by the three of them. Faust's face was filled with confusion. He didn't understand why the three of them were looking at him with such shock. Your face. Meryl stared at Faust with a horrified expression. If Faust looked like a middle-aged man in his 30s or 40s, then Faust now looked like an old man in his 50s or 60s. My face. Faust was puzzled. He reached out to touch his face. In the next moment, his eyes filled with shock and fear. He actually felt many wrinkles on his face. This wasn't there before. What? What's going on? He's a decade. While the fifth force was shocked by Faust's change, Gray was also looking at Faust. From his appearance, Faust seemed to have aged 10 or 20 years. Of course, that was just his appearance. In reality, his lifespan had been reduced by more than 10 or 20 years. As a magic light rank expert, the other party had a lifespan of at least 1,000 years. To be able to change the other party's appearance and make him look 10 or 20 years older, then the other party's actual lifespan might have been reduced to 1 or 200 years. What kind of ability is this? The four from the fifth force looked at Gray with fear. They had heard of an ability that could reduce one's lifespan, but they had never seen one. What they didn't expect was that the one who had this ability was a native of a subsidiary plane, an ability that can take your lives. Gray sneered. Seeing the effect of this attack, he was more confident in stopping or even killing the fifth force. Asterisk whoosh. Asterisk, his body was covered in purple light. He turned into a streak of purple light and rushed towards a four from the fifth force. Faust, you deal with Diphony Violet. Everyone else, follow me to deal with Gray Fergus. Be careful not to let him get close. Derek ordered. He slashed with his warblade, and a white chill spread out. A large amount of ice accompanied it, and it swept towards Gray with the power to freeze everything. Asterisk whoosh. Asterisk shrouded in purple light. Gray's fast-moving figure made a turn and immediately dodged the cold air, rushing toward the fifth force from another direction. The cold air spread all the way to the surrounding palaces. The surrounding palaces were instantly covered in ice, emitting white, cold air. It was as if the buildings were carved out of ice. At this moment, a golden blade emitting golden light turned into illusory golden shadows. It covered a large area and attacked Gray. It was Meryl's attack. The dark green mist turned into arrows and pierced towards Gray with a strong, corrosive aura. It was Chaucer's attack. His ability was Black Lightning, but with the help of the magic weapon in his hand, he launched a poison ability that covered a wider area. Both attacks were area of effect attacks. They sealed off Gray's escape routes. No matter if Gray dodged to the left or the right, he would be involved in the magic light level Bloodfiend ability. Whoosh! His entire body was enveloped by the purple light, and everything in the outside world seemed to slow down in Gray's eyes, including the golden shadows and dark green arrows that were attacking him. He dashed left and right, up and down, dodging the golden shadows and dark green arrows one after another. Finally, he rushed out and quickly rushed towards the man with the goatee, Chaucer. Crackle. Chaucer was shocked when he was targeted by Gray. He did not want to lose 1 or 200 years of his lifespan like Faust. He retreated rapidly and slashed with a war blade in his hand. A huge winding black lightning appeared and attacked Gray. Whoosh! Gray waved the sword in his hand, and a purple ray of light shot out, sweeping over the black thunderbolt that was attacking him. The power of the law of time immediately acted on the black lightning. Even if it was as powerful as the magic light ability, it was quickly weakened by the power of the law of time and finally disappeared. Whoosh! Gray continued to chase after Chaucer with murderous intent in his eyes. If he could seriously injure or even kill one of them, the pressure on him would be greatly reduced. Suddenly, cold air surged in front of him and golden shadows whistled, completely isolating him from Chaucer. He had no choice but to retreat, and Chaucer took the opportunity to pull away. What a pity! Gray felt it was a pity that the distance between them widened again. Although his ability had transformed into the power of the law of time, which made his combat power and speed not inferior to the magic light, he was facing 3 magic light after all. He could not easily gain the upper hand. The reason he could injure Faust before was because the 4 people from the 5th force were activating the blood sacrifice runes and were unable to move. However, it was different now. Although the activation of the blood sacrifice runes was stopped, the 5th force's combat power was freed. He's become so strong. Gray felt it was a pity, but Derek, Merrill, and Chaucer were shocked. Faust could barely contend with one of them after using his blood skill, but now he could contend with all 3 of them without using his blood skill. His growth speed could only be described as terrifying. At this moment, they were already regretting not attacking him after the 4 people had recovered their magic light realm. If they had attacked back then, although they would have taken some risks, it would not have been as dangerous as now. You're unlucky to have met me. Faust had lost 100 or 200 years of his life for no reason, and he did not know if he could make up for it. At this moment, he was in an extremely bad mood. After looking at Gray with fear, he pounced on Diphony Violet with a fierce gaze. He wanted to take revenge on Diphony Violet for what Gray Fergus had done to him. He wanted Diphony Violet to die in pain to vent his anger. Whoosh! With a swing of the dagger, the dark green mist carried a strong, corrosive aura. It was like a rolling wave, wave after wave, attacking Diphony Violet. Whoosh, whoosh! Diphony Violet's expression was serious. She slashed out with her golden dagger, and purple flames turned into a sea of flames in front of her. Whoosh, whoosh! The dark green mist and the sea of flames collided. The mist was ignited, and the flames were corroded. The 2 were in a stalemate, and finally dissipated. Under the power of the 2, even the buildings that had been reinforced by the runes were corroded and melted. Diphony Violet didn't even have time to catch his breath before a figure charged at him. The figure held a dark green mist dagger and slashed at him vertically. When their abilities collided, Faust used his magic light realm speed to close the distance between him and Diphony Violet. Clang! Diphony Violet blocked the attack with purple flames on the golden dagger. The surrounding buildings collapsed under the shockwave. Even the runes that had been reinforced could not withstand the force of the attack. Only the altar in the middle of the room remained unmoved. As an important part of the planar origin formation, its defensive power was so strong that even magic light realm attacks could not shake it. Clang, clang. Faust's speed increased to the maximum, and he circled around Diphony Violet, attacking continuously. Diphony Violet was forced to defend herself and was at a complete disadvantage. Faust's strength was comparable to that of magic light, but the difference between him and a true magic light was obvious. Bang! After a few exchanges, Diphony Violet was sent flying by the force of the attack. She slammed into a building behind her, smashing through several buildings before finally coming to a stop. Pooh! Her clothes were tattered, and her face was covered in dirt. There were many injuries on her body, and her internal organs had been severely shaken. She spat out a mouthful of blood. Ha ha! Faust laughed coldly. He wielded his dark green dagger, and a look of amusement appeared in his eyes. His body turned into a blur as he closed in on Diphony Violet. He wanted to torture her to death. He wanted her to die a miserable death. That was the only way to appease his anger at the loss of her lifespan. Chapter 602. Sir Diphony. Gray frowned slightly. Although he was in the middle of a battle, he was still paying attention to Diphony Violet's battle. Seeing Diphony Violet injured and sent flying, he couldn't help but worry. The difference between magic light and Diphony Violet was too great, and she was injured in just a short while. After a slight hesitation, a figure appeared in front of him and pounced at Faust, who was fighting Diphony Violet like a bolt of lightning. This figure was Blair Blaze, who was being controlled by his corpse control ability. Originally, he was going to use him to deal with Derek and the others, but now it seemed that he could only use him to deal with Faust together with Diphony Violet. Whoosh! As a speed-type magic light, Blair Blaze's speed was extremely fast. In just a few flashes, he was already close to Faust and Diphony Violet. There was movement behind them, and the two couldn't help but look out of the corner of their eyes. Seeing that it was Blair Blaze, Diphony Violet was slightly relieved. With his current strength, it was still too difficult to face Magic Light. If he could control Blair Blaze with his corpse control ability to share the pressure, his situation would be better. Oomph. Faust's face turned cold. He snorted and swung the short sword in his hand. The dark green mist turned into a crescent shape and slashed at Blair Blaze. Boom! The crescent-shaped dark green mist hit Blair Blaze, and a large amount of dark green mist splattered everywhere. The surrounding buildings were riddled with holes under the sputtering dark green mist and finally collapsed. However, Blair Blaze, who was attacked by the dark green mist, didn't have the slightest bit of damage on his silver-gray alloy body. Even his movement speed wasn't affected, and he continued to rush at Faust. What? Seeing that Blair Blaze was unaffected and continued to rush at him, Faust's pupils shrank, and his face finally became serious. Whoosh! Blair Blaze rushed in front of Faust and stabbed at him with his golden spear. Clang! With a tilt of the dark green dagger, Valtz knocked away the golden spear and forced Blair Blaze back. At this time, a purple flame spread over. Faust's expression changed, and he dodged to the side, but the purple flame still grazed his left arm. His clothes were burnt, and a burn appeared on his arm. Damn it! Looking at the burn on his left arm, Faust's face turned ashen. He was actually at a disadvantage against a zombie and a human. Whoosh! Gray rushed out from the gaps between the golden blade phantoms. He noticed from the corner of his eyes that Diphony Violet and Blair Blaze had joined hands to gain the upper hand. He heaved a sigh of relief and looked at Derek and the other two with a cold glint in his eyes. It's time for me to make my move. Woo-woo. A misty crystal ball appeared in his hand. After injecting the power of blood into it, the area within a few kilometers was instantly enveloped in white mist. After the mist was used up in the last battle, he wrapped the crystal ball in magic crystals and used the magic crystals to recover the mist inside. Be careful, let's rush out. This mist has the ability to cause hallucinations. Derek and the other two's expressions changed when they saw the mist around them. They already knew the power of this weapon and attacked at the same time. They slashed with the power of their blood beasts and forcibly opened up 3 fog-free areas in the mist. They quickly rushed out. Whoosh! Whoosh! Derek and Meryl successfully rushed out of the mist, but on the other side, Faust was blocked by Gray when he was about to rush out. Faust paused for a moment when he saw Gray blocking his way. It was this pause that allowed the surrounding mist to spread over again and cover up the fog-free areas he slashed out. He was once again trapped in the mist. Not good. Chaucer is trapped inside. Let's attack together from the outside and disperse the mist. After rushing out of the mist, Derek and Meryl immediately discovered that Chaucer was unable to escape. Their expressions changed, and they attacked the mist at the same time to disperse it. Whoosh! Although they were also in the mist, Gray's vision was clear. He slashed with his sword, and a purple light immediately attacked Chaucer. Pung! The mist had the ability to cause hallucinations. Any sounds heard in the mist would be different from the actual location. When Chaucer sensed the danger and dodged in a certain direction, he took the initiative to meet the purple light head-on and was hit by it. Under the purple light, his face quickly aged. His hair and the goatee on his chin turned gray and white. He quickly turned from a middle-aged man to a man in his 60s or 70s. His lifespan had been reduced by this attack even more than Faust's. Faust had taken Gray's purple light head-on. A large part of the purple light had been used to break through Faust's magic light level defense. Simply put, it accelerated the flow of time where Faust was hit and caused his body to decay. This was to achieve the goal of breaking through his defense. The purple light had spread all over Chaucer's body and accelerated the flow of time in every part of his body. Although there were no wounds, his lifespan had been reduced by more. No, my lifespan. Chaucer immediately felt that his body had aged greatly. His originally energetic body had lost some of its strength. Cold sweat appeared on his forehead. Even if he was heavily injured, it was better than losing his lifespan. After all, being heavily injured didn't necessarily mean death, but losing his lifespan meant losing at least 100 years. Crackle. With a slash of the blade, the black lightning cleaved out a fog-free area in the fog. He panicked and rushed out of the fog-free area, but Gray, who was enveloped in blue light, once again appeared in front of him. He clenched his teeth, and black lightning wrapped around his saber as he slashed at Gray, who was blocking his way. Gray's sword was wrapped in blue light, and he blocked the saber. Clang! Both Gray and Chaucer couldn't help but retreat from the violent collision. At this moment, the mist in the surroundings pervaded the air once more and enveloped both of them. No! Chaucer was covered in the mist again. His back was drenched in cold sweat, and his face was distorted with fear. He wasn't sure if he would die if he was hit again. Whoosh! Gray's eyes were filled with murderous intent. His expression was cold as the blue light attacked Chaucer again. At this moment, Pata, the mist that had filled the air, suddenly collapsed. Under Derek and Merrill's continuous attacks, the mist was completely exhausted and disappeared. Meanwhile, Chaucer, Derek, and Merrill immediately detected the blue light that was attacking Chaucer. Chaucer dodged. Derek and Merrill's expressions changed drastically as they cried out in alarm. Chaucer, who was targeted by the blue light, felt his heart beat wildly. Under the stimulation of his desire to live, his reaction was far beyond his usual. He stomped hard on the ground, and countless cracks appeared under his feet. Relying on the rebounding force, he dodged to the side. Whoosh! He brushed past the purple light. A tuft of his hair brushed past the purple light, and it quickly withered and decayed. Death was so close to him. Huff, huff! After dodging the purple light, he panted heavily. His body felt heavy, as if he had used up all his energy in that instant. Whoosh, whoosh! Gray raised his sword and prepared to slash out the purple light again. At this moment, the golden shadow of a sharp blade and the white cold air quickly attacked Gray. Gray had no choice but to turn into a purple light to dodge the attack. After dodging the attack, he discovered that Chaucer had distanced himself from him with a horrified expression. Just a little bit more. Gray was filled with regret that he had lost the opportunity to continue attacking. If he had been able to finish off Chaucer, he would have had a great chance of winning this battle. He was confident that he could take on two opponents at the same time. I didn't expect him to be so difficult to deal with. Derek and Merrill glanced at Chaucer, who had turned into a man in his 60s or 70s. While they were horrified, they also felt jealous and a trace of relief. They were horrified at the terrifying encounter after being hit by the purple light. It was a terrifying ability to reduce one's lifespan. They were jealous at the fact that even in the source world, where powerful organizations were everywhere and geniuses were born, there were very few people with such abilities. Chaucer, a native of a dimension that relied on the source world, actually possessed such an ability. This made them go crazy with jealousy. Meanwhile, they were relieved that Chaucer was the one who had been stopped, and not the two of them. The four of them were only temporarily formed because they wanted to retrieve the magical weapons. Naturally, they didn't have a deep relationship with each other. This principle naturally applied to them. This is troublesome. It would be great if we could use blood skills to increase our combat strength. It's a pity that we failed our mission. The blood skills that we cultivated are all support type. Merrill frowned and pursed her lips. Different planes had different planar laws. Some planar laws were loose and did not reject outsiders. Even outsiders could unleash their full strength. On the other hand, some dimensions had extremely xenophobic laws. Once an outsider entered, most of their abilities would be suppressed. This was the case in this dimension. Of course, the organization that they belonged to saw this point and ultimately chose this dimension as their breeding ground. This was because this dimension would restrict their enemies while restricting them. In order to release their restricted abilities, the blood skills that they cultivated were support type. They could absorb the source aura of the substances produced in this world and make their auras similar to the aura of this world to achieve the goal of releasing their abilities. It was also because of this reason that they could not use blood skills to increase their combat strength. Looks like I can only use blood skills. Gray's eyes flashed with determination when he saw that he could not kill a single person even after using the fog crystal ball. He did not use blood skills immediately because he wanted to see how strong his combat strength was with the ability of the time rule. On the other hand, although the ability of the time rule was powerful, it also consumed a lot of blood power. If he were to use his blood skill while using the time law ability, his blood power would be depleted even faster. In such a situation, it would be very easy for him to end up in an awkward situation where he would run out of blood power before his enemies were all killed. Now, he had used almost all of his methods and still could not take down the three of them. He could only take the risk and use blood skills. 15_15674/ Chapter 603. Communicating with the law of madness brand in his mind. The law of madness phantom appeared in Gray's body, stimulating the blood power in Gray's body in a certain way and rapidly depleting it. Crack! Crack! Gray's body quickly expanded under his black battle armor, quickly growing to over 2 meters tall. If the previous Gray had given others the impression of an elegant noble, then the current Gray gave others the impression of a battle-hardened warrior. He looked coldly at Derek and the other two, a murderous intent surging toward them. Be careful, he's using a blood skill. Seeing Gray's transformation, Derek and the other two could not help but turn serious. They knew that the critical moment had arrived. If the three of them could withstand Gray's next violent attack and hold on until Gray's blood power was exhausted, then they would be the victors. With his blood power depleted, Gray would not be able to do anything. If the three of them could not hold on, then they would face failure in their mission, and even their own lives would be buried in this plane. Attack together, don't give him a chance to get close to us. As long as we can hold on, we'll win. Derek growled. Facing the pressure of life and death, his face became ferocious, and a trace of madness appeared in his eyes. Whoosh! The saber in his hand slashed down, and a terrifying cold air suddenly spread out. Under the cold air, the surrounding area was covered in ice and snow, and quickly spread in the direction of Gray. Merrill and Chaucer naturally understood the current situation. If they could hold on, they would win, but if they could not, they would lose. Thus, they both attacked with serious expressions. One of them had a hiltless blade floating in front of him that was as dazzling as the sun, and the entire blade turned into a beam of golden light that attacked Gray. The other person's black lightning burst forth, turning into a huge meandering lightning bolt that left a charred mark on the ground. It attacked Gray at a speed that was not slower than the golden light. Swoosh! Being targeted by 3 magic light level attacks, Gray's expression was cold. Purple light wrapped around the sword in his hand, and he slashed horizontally. The purple light spread out like a waterfall, meeting the 3 magic light level attacks head-on. The first thing that collided with the purple light was the white cold air. The white cold air rippled violently when it collided with the purple light, but in the end, the white cold air dissipated completely. Meanwhile, the purple light continued to move forward to meet another magic light level attack. Puff! This time, it encountered the golden blade that had turned into golden light. When it encountered the purple light, the golden blade also revealed violent waves. However, this time, it was the purple light that was shattered and not the golden blade. The purple light shattered, and the golden blade pierced through. Although its power was greatly reduced, it still continued to attack Gray. Clang! The long sword was wrapped in purple light, and Gray gently blocked it. Then, his figure that was shrouded in purple light vanished. The moment he disappeared, an enormous black lightning bolt extended to other parts of the palace. Along the way, many buildings were charred and collapsed. Whoosh! More than 100 meters away from where he was, Gray's figure appeared. Facing the joint attack of the 3 demon lights, even with his current defensive capabilities, it was impossible for him to withstand their attacks without being affected. Thus, facing the joint attack of the 3 demon lights, he chose to use his Blood Beast's ability to resist and use his speed to dodge. So, it's only at this level. Looking at where he was, he raised his eyebrows. Although he did not know how strong a level 2 magic light was, he was very sure that the attack just now was definitely not as strong as a level 2 magic light. A level 2 magic light level attack was definitely not something that could not be blocked by 2 magic light level attacks. This could be inferred from the difference between the levels of each level. Without using Berserk, his combat strength was already comparable to that of magic light. After using Berserk, his combat strength had only increased by a small margin. This made him very dissatisfied. It seems that blood skills do not have the same effect on all levels. Gray thought to himself. Every level of magic weapon had its own people that were suitable for it. For example, a gold-level weapon could be used by a king-level warrior. However, if it was used by a magic light warrior, although it could increase his combat strength and give him an advantage when fighting someone of the same level, it could not be used to fight someone of a higher level. Similar to magic weapons, blood skills were very likely to be the same. The same level of understanding of blood skills corresponded to different levels, so the increase in combat strength would be different. When he was king level, he could use his blood skills to fight against magic light. However, when his combat strength reached the level of magic light, it was very difficult for him to use his blood skills to fight someone of a higher level. If he wanted to use Berserk to fight someone of a higher level, he would have to reach the second or third level of understanding of his blood skills. Fortunately, blood skills are not completely useless. The look in his eyes was replaced by coldness. Gray's figure, which was shrouded in purple light, dashed out quickly. Whoosh! Gray dashed out of the gaps between the golden shadows. Whoosh! Gray dodged the meandering black lightning and brushed past it. Whoosh! Gray moved into the air, dodging the white cold air that was surging and spreading like waves of the sea. Gray actually dodged Derek and the other two's attacks consecutively and closed the distance between them. At this moment, his speed was much faster than before he used Berserk. It was obvious that the increase in speed from his blood skills had not been reduced. This was not difficult to understand. Berserk's effect on his speed was to strengthen his body, while Time Ability's effect on his speed was to affect the time around him. The effects of the two skills were different and would not interfere with each other. Oh no, his speed has been increased by his blood skills. Derek and the other two, who had a better understanding of blood skills than Gray, immediately understood the reason behind this. They could not help but heave a sigh of relief when they saw that the Blood Fiend's power had not increased much after Gray had used Berserk. However, the three of them didn't have time to rejoice for long. They were shocked to discover that although Gray's Blood Fiend ability didn't increase by much, Gray's speed had increased by a large margin. He was much faster than before, and he actually relied on his speed to evade their attacks. This was a great crisis. If their opponent closed in on them with such speed, they would be in danger. Retreat while attacking him to stop him from getting closer. Derek ordered decisively. While the three of them retreated, they attacked Gray crazily. Rumble, rumble, rumble. Within the palace, large areas of buildings were collapsing. In just a few moments, almost half of the buildings were destroyed. Even if they were strengthened by runes, they could not withstand the attacks of magic light level, let alone the attacks of multiple magic light level experts. Only important places like the altar, which had been strengthened by runes of a higher level, were not damaged by the shockwaves. Dirt and rocks flew everywhere. Smoke and dust filled the air, and frost spread everywhere. It was a doomsday scene. If there were people living here, they would have died in the thousands. Whoosh! In the smoke and dust, a purple light rushed out and chased after Derek and the other two. It was Gray. Relying on his speed, he managed to dodge the bombardment of the Blood Fiends. Swish! Gray sneered as he glanced at Derek and the other two. He turned into a purple light and chased after Chaucer. The distance between him and Chaucer was quickly closing. Chaucer, who had lost a lot of his lifespan, was obviously the most suitable target. Damn it, Gray Fergus has his eyes on me. Chaucer's back was drenched in cold sweat as he closed the distance between him and Gray. Fear rose in his heart and his face became ferocious as he attacked Gray wildly. In his current state, if he were to be attacked by Gray's ability again, he would probably die of old age. Crackle. Gigantic meandering black lightning bolts and dark green arrows were shot at Gray by Chaucer, but Gray dodged them all. Beside him, Derek and Merrill were anxious. They also attacked Gray with cold air and golden blades, but Gray still managed to dodge them. Finally, Gray closed the distance between him and Chaucer. Swish! Chaucer slashed out with his long sword that was covered in purple light. Suddenly, a purple light spread out like a waterfall. Swish! Unknowingly, Chaucer's clothes were already drenched in cold sweat. He stared at Gray with his scarlet eyes, paying attention to Gray's every move. When he saw the purple light coming from Gray, he stomped on the ground. After countless cracks appeared on the ground, his body suddenly rose up and moved into the air. He knew that he could not block the purple light with his combat strength, so he could only dodge. The purple light passed through his feet and spread into the distance. The surface of the buildings in the distance became mottled and then collapsed. They had been decaying for thousands of years. Chaucer, be careful. After dodging the purple light, Derek didn't even have the time to breathe a sigh of relief when he suddenly heard Derek and Merrill's anxious cries. Looking up, he immediately saw that the distance between him and Gray had been closed once again, and another purple light had been slashed out from Gray's sword. Chaucer stomped his feet in the air, trying to dodge like before. Unfortunately, he no longer had the ability to dodge the purple light that had closed the distance between them. No, he screamed in fear and despair. He no longer had the coldness he had when he discovered that it was Gray who had ruined the blood sacrifice and wanted to kill Gray. If he could go back on his word, he definitely would not have accepted this mission of greater contribution, less danger to come to this plane. Who said that magic light could not be born in this plane? In front of him was Blair Blaze. Behind him was Gray Fergus, especially Gray Fergus. His combat strength had already surpassed normal magic light. Was it that magic light could not be born in this plane? He really wanted to slap the face of the person who had promised that magic light could not be born in this plane. He wanted to show him that this was the plane that he had promised that magic light could not be born in because of the planar origin formations restrictions. Unfortunately, he no longer had this opportunity. Buzz. His body was enveloped in purple light, and the hair on his body was visibly turning snow white. His skin was quickly covered in wrinkles, piling up like the bark of an old tree. In fact, it was even uglier than that. Age spots covered his face, making people worry that the skin on his face would fall off on its own. His eyes also became extremely murky, without any luster. Thud! His body stiffened and fell to the ground, not making any sound. He had died of old age after being stripped of his lifespan. Chapter 604. Chaucer. Looking at the lifeless Chaucer who had fallen from the sky, Derek and Merrill's eyes were filled with fury and shock. They were furious at Chaucer's death, but at the same time, they were shocked by his death. Although they were not very close, they were still from the same faction and were comrades on the same mission. Chaucer's death naturally infuriated them. Chaucer's death announced that Gray Fergus had the ability to deprive them of their lifespans and kill them. This strange way of dying and the dangerous situation that threatened their lives made them feel uneasy and terrified. It's your turn. After glancing at the dead Chaucer and confirming that he was completely dead, Gray looked coldly at Derek and Merrill. The killing intent in his eyes was like rolling dark clouds that covered the sky. Whoosh! The next moment, he turned into a purple light and pounced toward the two. He must not have much blood power left. As long as we can hold on for a while, we will win. Looking at Gray, who had turned into a purple light and pounced toward them, Derek and Merrill felt their scalps go numb. They quickly retreated with intense fear in the depths of their eyes. The eerie white cold air was like rolling waves, bringing with it an extreme chill. The illusory golden blades were like streaks of golden light, bringing with them a sharp aura as they attacked Gray. They did not hope to injure Gray because they knew that with Gray's current defense, they would not be able to harm him. They only hoped to stop Gray from getting closer and stall for time until Gray's blood power was exhausted. The two of them had never thought of escaping separately. They might be able to survive if they worked together, but if they were to escape separately, with Gray Fergus's speed and the power of his blood fiends, one of them would definitely die. The two of them clearly did not want to be the one to die. Whoosh! Covered in purple light, everything in the outside world seemed to slow down in Gray's eyes. He could clearly see the process of the frost spreading on the ground, and the air ripples caused by the illusory golden blades streaking through the air were also clearly visible. The purple light enveloped Gray. He was like a purple ray of light, shuttling through the gaps between the cold air and the illusory golden blades, rapidly approaching Derek and Meryl. Whoosh! When he got close, he swept his gaze over Derek and Meryl before finally locking his cold gaze onto Derek. The sword in his hand slashed out, and a violet light rippled out, giving off a strange aura as it shot towards Derek. Seeing the purple light coming towards him, Derek's hair stood on end, and his forehead was covered with cold sweat. He suddenly burst out with his fastest speed, and dust splashed up from where he was standing as his body moved sideways to dodge. Crash! The purple light passed through his original position and swept towards the buildings behind him. The buildings behind him immediately became mottled and then collapsed like rain. Derek didn't have time to look at the decaying and collapsing buildings behind him under the purple light. While the terrifying cold air surged towards Gray, he quickly retreated. He knew that the attack wouldn't end here. Sure enough, another purple ray of light quickly swept towards him with a ripple in its wake. After dodging his cold air and Meryl's golden blade, Gray attacked him again. Swoosh! Derek's sweat was shaken off as he moved quickly. The purple light brushed past Derek's body, and the clothes on Derek's back quickly decayed into powder and disappeared. Whoosh! Whoosh! Derek dodged two more purple lights, and each time, the purple light would just brush past him. One of the strengths of his blood technique was speed. His speed could reach the peak of Demon Shine's first level. With this speed, he was able to dodge the purple light several times in a row, unlike Chaucer, who was easily swept by the purple light. However, this was almost his limit because Gray was getting closer and closer to him. Whoosh! A purple light beam came at him, and the distance was so close that he couldn't dodge it. Clenching his teeth, he swung his sword at the purple light beam with cold air. Chi! After coming into contact with the purple light beam, the cold air on his sword dissipated under the effect of time. Although the purple light beam had lost more than half of its power, a small part of it still hit him. Originally, his blood arts had another aspect of strength. Combining his strength with his blood fiends, the power he could unleash was enough to reach the peak of the first level of magic light. It was enough to tear apart any first-level magic light attack. The purple light beam's power was also at the first level of magic light after being amplified by fury. Unfortunately, the purple light beam was more of a law than a light beam. Physical attacks were completely ineffective. Surrounded by the purple light beam, he was terrified. He struggled violently, trying to tear the purple light beam apart with brute force. However, it was futile. It wasn't something that could be torn apart with physical strength. The law of time acted on his body, and it was as if he had experienced tens or hundreds of years in an instant. When he came back to his senses, he realized that his originally tense muscles had loosened slightly. It was obvious that his lifespan had been reduced. That was indeed the case. At this moment, his appearance had changed from that of a middle-aged man to that of an old man. Although it was only a small part of the purple light's power, it had still shaved off over 100 years of his lifespan. Meryl, support me. He won't be able to last much longer. Feeling his lifespan being stripped away, fear rose in Derek's heart. Shock appeared in the depths of his eyes. Knowing that he had been targeted by Gray, he anxiously called out to Meryl. At this moment, something unexpected happened. Sorry, I don't want to die yet. Fear appeared on Meryl's beautiful face. She retreated without hesitation, fleeing to the side. Fighting the enemy together with Derek was indeed possible for her to last until Gray Fergus's blood power was exhausted and turned the tables. However, it was also possible that Gray Fergus' blood power was enough to kill the two of them here. Now, an opportunity had presented itself before her. Derek had clearly been targeted by Grey Fergus. In other words, if the two of them fled at the same time, Grey Fergus would definitely chase after Derek, who had already been affected by time. Thus, she turned and fled without hesitation. "Meryl, you scoundrel!" Seeing that Meryl had actually abandoned him and fled, Derek was so angry that his face turned ashen. He roared with a ferocious and twisted expression. If he were in Meryl's shoes, he would have chosen the same method. However, when others treated him in such a manner, he was abnormally furious. This was human nature. He would rather betray others than have others betray him. Swish! Gray's figure quickly charged toward Derek, and another flash of purple light attacked Derek. Just as Meryl had thought, between her and Derek, Gray would indeed choose Derek, who had already been affected by time and was easier to kill. Whoosh! Seeing the purple light attack, Derek's expression turned ferocious due to despair. Cold air enveloped the war blade in his hand as he slashed at the purple light. The same result as before appeared. Under the residual power of the purple light, Derek's body once again aged greatly. His snow-white hair was even falling off and becoming sparse. Obvious age spots appeared on the surface of his skin. At this moment, he was like a blood beast that had once dominated the forest, but now had sparse hair and was in its twilight years. Swish! Gray's eyes were cold as another flash of purple light attacked Derek. The aging of his body greatly reduced Derek's mobility. This time, before he could even swing his blade, the purple light had already collided with the blade in his hand. Under the purple light, his face rapidly aged. His hair had completely fallen off, and his face was filled with wrinkles. His body emitted a rotting smell. In the end, he collapsed, dying from the exhaustion of his lifespan, just like Chaucer. I really got to watch a good show. Glancing at Derek's corpse, then looking in the direction Meryl had escaped, Gray's lips curled into a mocking smile. The next moment, his height of over 2 meters quickly shrunk and returned to normal. A wave of dizziness assaulted his head, and he had to force himself to stay upright. The power of the law of time, coupled with his blood skills, consumed his power of blood too quickly. After killing Chaucer and Derek in succession, his power of blood was almost depleted. If Meryl had chosen to stay and deal with him together with Derek, he would have been in danger. It was a pity that Meryl had chosen to abandon Derek and flee. It cannot be said that she had made the wrong choice, but that she had chosen the path with the greatest chance of survival. If she had stayed and fought alongside Derek, she might have lived or died. However, if she had chosen to flee, her chances of survival would have been extremely high. With the speed of magic light, she could run several miles in a few moments. After losing track of the other party, the chances of finding them had become extremely small unless there were several people who were not slower than Meryl to split up and search for them, or if they were adept at tracking. Gray naturally did not have several people with speed comparable to magic light, and he was not adept at tracking, so the other party's escape was inevitable. However, escaping was only temporary. Gray believed that he would meet the other party soon. When the time came, he would definitely give the other party a surprise. What he was more concerned about now was the battle between Tefoni Violet Brellblaze and the other person from the fifth faction. Pooh! A golden spear pierced Faust's abdomen, and a wound appeared on his abdomen as he staggered back. He was currently in an extremely miserable state, with dozens of wounds of various sizes all over his body. Some of the wounds were char black, and his injuries were not light. It wasn't that he hadn't thought of fleeing after seeing what had happened to Chaucer and Derek. Unfortunately, Blair Blaze was faster than him, and Typhony Violet was also present. He had no chance of escaping at all. Pooh! As he staggered back, a purple flame attacked Faust's back. Unable to dodge in time, Faust's back was immediately charred black. His continuous injuries had left him in a heavily injured state, and his movements had become sluggish. Looks like I don't have to do anything. Gray had used up quite a bit of his blood force, but there were no enemies that could pose a threat. He did not intend to waste a precious high-grade recovery potion to quickly recover his blood force. Seeing that Faust was not far from death under the combined attacks of Diphony Violet and Blare Blaze, he decided not to interfere in this battle. Pooh! Sure enough, after a few minutes of fighting, Faust collapsed under a purple flame, completely dead. He had died under the combined attacks of Diphony Violet and Blare Blaze. Chapter 605. An altar covered in blood-red patterns, like a huge blood-red carpet, was located in the center of the hall, surrounded by many buildings. At this time, these buildings had all collapsed in the battle just now, and the broken surface was full of traces of various blood fiends' abilities, but this altar was intact, without the slightest bit of damage. Even during the previous fierce battle, it hadn't suffered the slightest damage. The high-ranked rune reinforcement had strengthened its defense to a frightening degree. Even magic light-ranked attacks would find it difficult to damage it. In the center of this altar, there was a circular barrier of about 10 square meters emitting white light. The barrier was like a pillar of light that reached the sky and could be seen from afar. Inside the barrier, a sword-shaped weapon emitted a bright golden light, as dazzling as the golden sun, and could not help but be intoxicated by its beauty. This is the magic weapon that the fifth faction wants to recover. Gray and Diphony Violet stood beside the circular barrier, looking at the sword-shaped weapon inside the barrier. This was a beautiful golden sword, like a work of art, but the terrifying aura it emitted indicated its identity. It was not a work of art, but a killing weapon. Let me see if I can break it. Diphony Violet's golden sword was entwined with purple flames, and he slashed at the white barrier. But the white barrier did not have the slightest bit of damage. Instead, he was pushed back a few steps by the white barrier, and with a slightly serious expression, he slashed again. Pung, pung, pung. After slashing more than 10 times, Diphony Violet's remaining blood force was completely exhausted, but the white barrier still did not have the slightest bit of damage, and even its strength did not decrease in the slightest. This barrier is not simple. Even with magic light level combat power, it is almost impossible to break it. Diphony Violet gasped, shaking his head and saying, I really don't know how the fifth faction will take this sword out in the end. Either they have a way to open the defensive barrier, or this barrier will disappear by itself after the blood sacrifice, Gray said as he walked around the defensive barrier. At first, he underestimated the defense of this defensive barrier and thought that with magic light level combat power, he could break it. Now, it seemed that magic light level combat power would not be able to break it, at least not with ordinary magic light level combat power. What should we do with this place? One of the members of the Fifth Force escaped, and it is very likely that he will return to take this magic weapon. If this weapon falls into the hands of the other party, the consequences will be very serious. Diphony Violet looked at Gray. Even now, there was still a trace of surprise in his eyes. In a 1 versus 3 battle, in a situation where Gray had single-handedly fought against 3 demon lights, not only had he won, but he had even killed 2 of them. This sort of battle record could only be described as horrifying. He had barely managed to kill a magic light after teaming up with Blare Blaze. He was well aware of how difficult it was to kill a magic light. How terrifying was Gray's combat power to be able to fight 1 against 3 and kill 2 of them. Although he had long been unable to see through Gray's depth, he had long guessed that he was likely no longer a match for Gray. However, he did not expect that the current Gray had already become so powerful. Linley's combat power was no longer as simple as being able to contend with Magic Light players. He was already able to completely crush ordinary Magic Light players. The other party might not dare to come back, but to be on the safe side, I will leave Blare Blaze here guard. Once the other party appears, I will be able to sense it immediately, Gray said as he crouched down and knocked on the altar beneath his feet. He already had a plan in mind. Using spatial teleportation, the 2 of them left this hall and returned to Fergus Castle. The people anxiously waiting in Fergus Castle immediately came up to them and asked about the final result. What? 3 of the 4 Magic Light players of the Fifth Force were killed, and only 1 escaped. Gasps could be heard everywhere. Gasps could be heard in Fergus Castle after hearing the final result. Facing 4 Magic Light players, in their opinion, Even stopping the fifth force's blood sacrifice would be extremely difficult. They did not expect that not only did the two of them stop the fifth force's blood sacrifice, but they also killed 3 of the 4 magic light players. This result shocked, astonished, pleasantly surprised, and excited them. The older generation still forced themselves to be reserved. Although their faces were full of excitement, they forced themselves not to lose their aristocratic etiquette. However, many of the younger generation did not have the same restraint as the older generation. Many of them were so excited that they jumped up. Ever since Gray and Diphony Violet had left, everyone had been in a state of anxiety. They were worried that the two of them would fail and die at the hands of the fifth force. Now, the two of them had successfully stopped the fifth force's blood sacrifice plan and even killed 3 of their members. This unexpected result made them uncontrollably excited. Sir Diphony, how did you do it? Jennifer Austin came forward to ask, and this was the same question that almost everyone was curious about. Some of them had personally seen the power of the magic light players, and some had not seen it, but had heard of it. They were really curious as to how Gray and Diphony Violet, who had not reached the magic light level, had defeated the 4 magic light players. The reason we were able to achieve such a great result this time is mainly due to Sir Gray's contribution. Diphony Violet sighed. Sir Gray blocked 3 people by himself, and even killed 2 of them. Even the person I killed was only killed by Sir Gray's corpse control ability. Gray blocked 3 magic light players by himself, and he killed 2 magic light players by himself. Sir Gray killed 2 people by himself. Those who were familiar with Gray and those who were not were all looking at Gray in shock, with deep respect and shock in their eyes. One person fought 3 magic light players by himself and even killed 2 of them. What a valiant battle record. Just thinking about the battle scene at that time was enough to deeply shock them. To everyone present, Demonshine was an unattainable boundary. He was an existence that could easily crush them with a wave of his hand. But such an existence had actually been able to kill 2 of them, even though 3 of them had joined forces to fight against Gray, and yet 2 of them had been killed instead. What a valiant battle record. Many people looked at Gray as if they were looking at a monster. Gray was not even 25 years old, right? Now that he already had such powerful combat strength, how far could he grow in the future? The gap is getting bigger and bigger. Francis laughed bitterly. Not long ago, his combat strength was above Gray's. But now, Gray's combat strength was enough to crush magic light players, and he was only at the first tier of the king level. Yes, the gap is getting bigger and bigger. Sometimes, I can't help but wonder if my aptitude is too bad. The Gem Queen, Glenn Y. Austin, also shook her head and laughed bitterly. Her word from back then had been confirmed. The existence of this person was a huge blow to the younger generation. Now, even she could not think of chasing after him, let alone the other young people. That's right, don't be arrogant. Sophia's lips curled up slightly, and a faint smile hung on her beautiful face. She patted Gray's shoulder and said earnestly. Gray looked at her, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. When did he have such a leader? In a world of ice and snow, a beautiful woman with a beauty mark at the corner of her mouth was running through the sky. She was as fast as lightning, her figure streaking across the sky like a bolt of lightning, quickly disappearing into the distance. When they saw her fly through the sky, the irascible blood beasts prostrated themselves. Even the king-level blood beasts couldn't help but lower their heads, because she was accompanied by a terrifying pressure. Soon, I'll be at the realm barrier soon. After confirming that no one was chasing after her, Meryl let out a long sigh of relief. The heavy burden in her heart had finally been lifted slightly. The encounter a day ago was a nightmare to her. The blood sacrifice was interrupted just as it was about to reach its climax. Not only that, but 3 of her companions had also died. Although Derek and Faust were still alive when they left and were still holding on, she knew that their fates were already set. There was almost no other possibility apart from death. She couldn't help but think of the main culprit behind this outcome, Gray Fergus. His strength made her feel fear. He was practically a monster. Even in the origin world, where geniuses were common, there weren't many people with this kind of talent. It was hard to imagine that such a terrifying existence could be born on a barren plane that couldn't even produce magic light because of the planar origin formation suppression. Thankfully, she was about to reach the origin world's realm barrier. As long as she broke through it and returned to the origin world, she would be completely safe. She would definitely be severely punished for failing the mission, but even so, it was still better than dying here. In front of her, the pitch-black realm barrier appeared in front of her. She couldn't help but feel excited, and her running speed increased. Suddenly, she came to an abrupt stop, her eyes filled with shock as she stared in front of her. In front of her, at the origin world's realm barrier, a black-haired young man wearing black battle armor was calmly standing there. When he saw her arrive, he even smiled slightly at her, but that smile looked like the smile of a demon to her. Her face paled, and her heart began to beat wildly, as if it was about to jump out of her throat. She kicked off the air, changing directions in midair and fleeing in the direction she had come from. Whoosh! A blue light quickly chased after her from behind and quickly passed her. While she was still in shock, she was blocked in front of her and blocked her way. It was the black-haired young man from before. The black-haired young man was naturally Gray. After Meryl had escaped, Gray had guessed that she would very likely escape to this realm barrier and leave this world through it. As such, after returning to Fergus Castle, he had immediately left Fergus Castle and teleported here, waiting for her arrival. Chapter 606. Why are you here? Meryl looked at Gray with a pale face, despair rising in her heart. Having fought with Gray before, she naturally knew what the outcome would be if she encountered Gray in a one-on-one situation. Naturally, I'm waiting for you. The corners of Gray's mouth curled up slightly, his eyes cold. No, don't kill me. I can submit to you. Meryl felt her entire body turn cold under Gray's cold gaze, cold air continuously seeping into her body. First, answer a few questions of mine. Gray did not comment on Meryl's pleas for mercy. What questions? Meryl could tell from Gray's words that Gray had the intention of letting her go. Her despairing heart was immediately filled with hope, and she hurriedly asked, "What kind of world is behind this world barrier?" Gray pointed at the world barrier not far away. It's a world tens of millions of times larger than this plane. We call it the origin world. Speaking of the origin world, Meryl could not help but feel proud. Being born in the origin world was a sense of superiority that many born in the origin world had. However, when she thought of her current situation, she immediately felt dejected. Compared to him, he was more like a native born in the origin world, while she was more like a native born in the origin world. Tens of millions of times larger? Gray was slightly surprised. Although the world they were in could not be considered large, it definitely could not be called small either. How vast would a world tens of millions of times larger than this one be? Gray asked after some thought. You call our world a plane, and your world a world. Is there any difference? Yes, the two are different. There are many planes, but there is only one world, and that is the source world. In fact, all planes are born from the source world. They rely on the source world to exist. All planes are connected to the source world. A native of the origin world had actually become a native's prisoner. Meryl suppressed the sullenness in her heart and replied, Planes are born from the origin world and exist by relying on the origin world. Gray digested the information Meryl had given him. Although he had guessed from the actions of the fifth organization that it was very likely to come from a world of a higher level than this one, he had never thought that it would be such a higher world. The world they were in was actually only a subsidiary of the fifth organization's world. His breathing was heavy, which was caused by the excitement in his heart. Knowing that such a huge world existed, he suddenly felt a sense of longing. At this moment, he could already feel the feelings of those king-level cultivators who have been trapped in this world until their deaths. You should have an organization behind you. What is the name of the organization? Gray asked as he looked at Meryl after calming himself down. He had destroyed the fifth faction's blood sacrifice and even killed 3 of them. He must have formed an irreconcilable grudge with the faction behind the fifth faction. What he needed to do now was to understand this faction and be on guard against their revenge. We belong to the Radiant Temple, the Radiant Saint Hall. Gray slowly repeated the name of the organization, trying to understand it from the name. Gray could sense something extraordinary from the name. An organization that dared to use the name Radiant Saint Hall probably had quite the background. He said with a deep voice, "Tell me the strength of the Radiant Saint Hall in detail." "Yes," as Merrill explained. Gray's face gradually became stern. It could even be described as heavy. He understood from a simple understanding that the strength of the organization behind her was not something he could contend against right now. Compared to the organization behind her, he could only be described as weak. To give a simple example, a magic light level existence was already a peak existence in this plane, but in the other party's faction, they could barely reach the upper echelons. Above them were existences of even higher realms. It was easy to imagine how terrifying the faction behind the other party was. Although he had already guessed that the organization behind her would not be weak from the unknown grade of the magical weapon, he had never thought that it would be so powerful. To the current him, the organization behind her was basically a colossus. It was an existence that he could not defeat no matter what. The only fortunate thing was that due to the unique laws of this plane, the first level of magic light was the limit of descent. Existences at or above the level of magic light were unable to descend to this plane, or any one of them would be enough to kill him. "I've told you everything you want to know. Let me go, and I can rely on you." Meryl looked at Gray hopefully. Her chest jiggled slightly, revealing her full curves. The beauty mark at the corner of her mouth gave her a unique charm that made people want to conquer her. "I'm sorry, but I can't keep you here." Gray shook his head slightly. His eyes were cold and indifferent. He did not take Meryl's coquettish actions seriously. He was a normal person, so he obviously pursued beautiful things. However, when he thought about how she was old enough to be his grandmother's grandmother, he lost all interest. Didn't you just say you'll let me go if I answer your question?" Meryl's face was contorted in anger, her eyes spitting fire as she glared at Gray. "I didn't make such a promise." Gray had a mocking look on his face. He had indeed not made any promises. He had only cleverly used his tone to mislead her into thinking that he would let her go if she answered his question. "You'll die a horrible death." The golden blade shadows attacked Gray one after another. Meryl, whose face had turned ashen from anger, retreated hastily. Unfortunately, even though she retreated quickly, Gray was even faster. Even without using Berserk to increase his speed, Gray's speed was still above hers. Whoosh! Shrouded in purple light, Gray dodged the blurs of the golden blades and chased after Meryl at a speed even faster than she did. In just a few moments, he had already caught up to Meryl. A purple light rippled out from his body and swept towards Meryl. Whoosh! Meryl dodged in fear, but Gray was too close to her when he attacked. She could not block or dodge in time. Wong! Her body was enveloped in purple light, and in an instant, she felt as if hundreds of years had passed. She then discovered to her horror that her originally beautiful hair was gradually losing its luster, and her originally taut skin was slowly loosening. Asterisk pata. Asterisk, the purple light disappeared, and her appearance had changed from that of a pretty girl to that of a woman in her 50s. The crow's feet on her face were clearly visible. "No, no!" she screamed in fear and despair. She was frightened by her lost appearance and despaired of the fate that awaited her. "I'll fight you to the death." Under the threat of death, she found her courage and looked at Gray with hatred. The golden blades activated, and a golden light slashed towards Gray. Asterisk swish. Asterisk in response. Gray merely twisted his body and dodged the golden blades. The purple light attacked her from another direction. Wong. As expected, Meryl was once again enveloped in purple light. Her appearance and body aged at a rate visible to the naked eye. When the purple light disappeared, she had become a hunchbacked, white-haired old woman. Asterisk pung. Asterisk the old woman fell from the sky and crashed onto the icy ground. She struggled to stand up, but after several attempts, she was unable to do so. Instead, the hand that she had raised fell powerlessly, not moving at all. "She's already dead." Gray went up, and after confirming that she was dead, he was finally at ease. Gray did not dare to accept her surrender, because a magic light level existence was not something he could control. The slightest carelessness could cause him to suffer a backlash. If she escaped back to the origin world and exposed the situation here, the situation would be very disadvantageous. As such, Gray did not hesitate to kill her, leaving no room for negotiation. He found the runic portal bag on her body, and then picked up the 5 golden blades from before. Gray checked the other party's runic portal bag. There were quite a few magic coins, some magic potions, and some books. They were all quite valuable. Gray then looked at the golden blade without a handle. From the power displayed when she used it, it seemed that the golden blade did not increase her battle prowess at all. It seemed to be an ordinary silver weapon that could not increase the battle prowess of a magic light level existence. However, Gray had accidentally learned from Merrill that it was a gold weapon. Not only was it a gold blade, but Derek and Chaucer's blades and Faust's sword were also gold weapons. Of course, they were not gold weapons under normal circumstances. Instead, they were gold weapons that had been suppressed by the laws and had completely lost the ability to increase battle prowess. Not only can it suppress outsiders, but it can also suppress foreign magic weapons. The laws of this world did not only suppress outsiders, but also foreign magic weapons. When the 4 of them came to this world, the magic weapons they carried with them were also suppressed by the laws of this world. However, although they were suppressed, as long as they left this world, the suppression of the 4 magic weapons would naturally be lifted, and they would become gold weapons again. However, the 4 of them would never have the chance to do so. Looks like we won't be leaving this world anytime soon. After tidying up the spoils, Gray looked at the world barrier leading to the origin world. There was a trace of helplessness in his eyes. Originally, he wanted to visit the origin world when he had the time, but now it seemed that he would not be able to leave this world anytime soon. The desert behind the world barrier had already been secretly occupied by the Radiant Saint Palace. No one could leave or sneak in. If they tried to leave, it would be no different from suicide. I need to send someone to guard this place. The danger of the blood skill had been reduced, but there was now a powerful enemy called the Radiant Saint Palace. This made his heart feel rather heavy. In a short term, the Radiant Saint Palace probably would not discover that Derek and the others were dead. However, as time went on, they would definitely notice and send someone over. He needed to send someone to guard this place, and the person guarding it could not be weak. It would be best if they could match magic light in battle prowess. Although their strength would be suppressed because they had arrived in this world, their defenses were still there. If the person guarding it was too weak, they would not be able to do anything to the enemy. Chapter 607. That's a good choice. Teleporting, Gray left the edge of the world barrier. After several teleportations, he appeared near the palace in the Red Desert. Passing through the ruins of the palace, he arrived at the altar in the center. On the red altar, Blair Blaze was still faithfully carrying out his orders, but the people who were supposed to come would never come. Ignoring Blair Blaze, Gray went straight to Derek's corpse. The specialty of Derek's blood arts was that both his speed and strength had reached the pinnacle of his realm. Without even mentioning his speed, having this degree of strength meant that he could contend with an ordinary demon shine just by relying on his strength alone. If it wasn't for the fact that he had the ability of the law of time, which was at the level of laws, and was completely immune to physical attacks, he might not have been able to kill Derek. And such a corpse was obviously a much better target to control than Blair Blaze's corpse. When Gray thought of needing a magic light class combatant to guard the world barrier connecting to the origin world, he immediately thought of Brel. Using his corpse control ability, Derek's corpse stood up. On the other hand, Blair Blaze's corpse fell down. His corpse control bloodline was at the desolated level, so he could control at most one magic light master. After burying Blair Blaze's corpse, Gray returned to Fergus Castle. Once again, he went to the world barrier that connected to the origin world. Besides Derek, Bart, and several people he had revived with his resurrection ability were with him. He planned to let them stay here. Derek would be in charge of fighting, while the others would be in charge of monitoring the place. If anything happened, they would report to him immediately. After doing this, Gray let out a sigh of relief. He was safe as long as he didn't leave this realm. He had stopped the fifth force from the blood sacrifice world, but he had offended a super force. However, he didn't regret it. If he had to do it again, he would have done it again. It wasn't that he was selfless. It was just that this was the world he lived in, and his friends and family were here. In the center of the blood-red altar, a white beam of light shot straight to the sky. In the middle of the beam of light, a golden sword-shaped weapon floated in the air. It was as exquisite as a work of art, but it also carried with it a strong, murderous aura. After protecting the planar barrier that connected to the origin world, Gray came here again. How beautiful! Even though this was not the first time he had seen this sword-shaped weapon, Gray could not help but sigh at its beauty. He could not help but feel a deep desire when he looked at it. Under normal circumstances, it's almost impossible for a magic light tier to break through the barrier and obtain this weapon. Gray had inquired about this weapon from Meryl before, focusing on how to obtain this magical weapon. In the end, he was disappointed. If he wanted to obtain this magic weapon, he had to complete the final blood sacrifice. After the blood sacrifice was completed, the world's origin energy would dry up, and the protective barrier would naturally collapse. This method was obviously impossible. Putting aside the fact that he could not gather 4 magic light tiers to activate the blood sacrifice array pattern, even if he could, he would not do so. It's impossible under normal circumstances, but I can give it a try under abnormal circumstances. Gray tapped the altar beneath his feet with a sharp glint in his eyes. The white barrier existed because there were array patterns inscribed on the altar that could create it. In theory, as long as the altar was destroyed, the array patterns would naturally collapse, and the white barrier would disappear. Of course, this was only in theory. Even in the previous battle, the altar had not been damaged in the slightest. It could be seen that an altar reinforced with high-grade runes was extremely sturdy. It was not something that an ordinary magic light tier attack could break. The reason why Gray felt that he could give it a try was because his ability of the Law of Time was not an ordinary magic light tier attack. The way the Law of Time works is completely different from ordinary attacks. Unlike ordinary attacks, the Law of Time worked by accelerating the time of the target, making it seem as if the target had experienced hundreds or thousands of years in a short period of time to achieve the goal of decaying and aging the target. Moreover, this kind of attack was different from ordinary attacks. It could be stacked. If one attack did not achieve the desired effect, stacking it 2 or 3 times might be able to achieve the desired effect. Time was an absolutely sharp blade that could cause anything to decay. The only reason it did not decay was because it had not experienced enough time. This point could be used to destroy the altar. Although the altar was sturdy, would it still be as sturdy after tens of thousands of years? This was the method that Gray thought of to break the white barrier. He would use time to destroy the altar, destroy the array patterns on the altar, and finally break the white barrier. Gray retreated outside the altar. A purple light was swept out by Gray and landed on the altar. The altar did not change, but Gray did not care. The Law of Time continued to sweep the altar until the blood power was almost exhausted. After stopping, he walked back to the altar, squatted down, and touched the altar under his feet. With a gentle swipe, a thin layer of stone chips was wiped away. This was the stone chips that had fallen off from the altar. Although it was only a thin layer, Gray's eyes couldn't help but light up. This method is feasible, but I'm afraid it will take a lot of time. After that, Gray came to the altar almost every day to use the Law of Time to wear down the altar. A few months later, it should be soon, after a wave of the Law of Time, Gray's blood power was quickly depleted. He stopped and walked back to the altar. Under the constant attack of the Law of Time, the altar that was originally intact under the magic light attack was now full of traces of weathering. Many of the rune patterns that were originally buried deep inside the altar were exposed and damaged under the weathering. The originally transparent white light of the white defensive barrier had dimmed slightly. The defensive barrier should have been weakened. Of course, even if the defensive barrier was weakened, Gray still could not break it. However, according to his estimation, The defensive barrier was not far from collapsing on its own. With more and more damaged rune patterns, the white barrier was obviously on the verge of collapse. Gray left the altar and teleported back to the Fergus family. He then immediately set off for the capital of the Purple Moon Kingdom. "You're here." Sophia quickly appeared when she heard Gray's arrival. She was wearing a blue dress inlaid with purple gems. Her soft and beautiful purple hair was draped over her back and waist. A faint fragrance wafted through her hair. She wore a pair of long white fur gloves on her fair hands. On her feet, she wore a pair of leather boots that were inlaid with diamonds. They were similar to high heels in his previous life. She was already quite tall to begin with, but now she was even taller. There was no doubt about her outstanding and noble temperament. "If I didn't come, wouldn't you hold a grudge against me?" Gray smiled and handed a rectangular wooden box inlaid with gems to the maid beside him. There was a silver-grade spear-shaped weapon in the wooden box. Tonight, a banquet would be held in this mansion to celebrate Sophia's 24th birthday. After much consideration, he felt that this silver-grade spear-shaped weapon was the most suitable as a gift. "At least you know what's good for you." The corners of Sophia's mouth curled up slightly. There was a hint of a smile on her face. Following Sophia, he left the courtyard and came to a hall. Gray saw 3 familiar faces. One was Francis, another was Hylia. What surprised him was that the third familiar face was actually the Gemstone Queen, Glenway Austin. He did not expect her to come as well. "Gray, you're finally here. Someone has been calling your name several times." Seeing Gray, Francis shot a glance at Sophia beside Gray, his face full of teasing. Hearing Francis's teasing, Sophia's pretty face blushed slightly. She pretended to glare fiercely at Francis, baring her white teeth as she threatened. "Big brother, you're very free, aren't you? I'll definitely introduce you to a few more noble ladies at tonight's banquet." Sophia, can we talk about it?" Francis's expression froze for a moment, his face full of flattery. He was nearing 30 years old, although this world generally married late and had children late because of cultivation. At his age, he still needed to be anxious. The royal family was very anxious about this matter, so tonight's banquet also had the intention of finding a suitable noble lady for him. "No, this is Mother's request." Sophia held her head high, her face full of business, which made Francis smile bitterly. Gray, Hylia, and the Gemstone Queen, Glenway Austin, watched the interaction between the two with a smile. It was obviously very interesting to see others suffer. After some interaction, the 5 people casually discussed while eating pastries and drinking black tea. However, the content of the discussion was involuntarily biased towards the force behind the 5th force, because this was currently the matter that the Purple Moon Kingdom and the Jewel Kingdom were most worried about. Those present were the real powers of the Purple Moon Kingdom and the Jewel Kingdom, so they were naturally very concerned about this matter. Just how strong is this Temple of Light? The Gemstone Queen, Glenway Austin, looked at Gray and asked. She was wearing a purple dress dotted with green gemstones. It was slightly tight, and her curvaceous figure, especially her pair of slender and beautiful long legs, were clearly outlined. There was a red gemstone between her eyebrows, and her fair and delicate face was different from the gentle beauty of ordinary women. There was more of a heroic spirit, but did not make people feel uncomfortable. Instead, it had a different kind of temperament. This time, he came to Sophia's birthday banquet to strengthen the relationship between the Jewel Kingdom and the Purple Moon Kingdom. On the other hand, he wanted to ask Gray about the Temple of Light. Although the Jewel Kingdom's royal family had already received a letter from the Purple Moon Kingdom's royal family, the letter was obviously not as direct as asking Gray, the information provider, directly. Chapter 608. Very strong, very strong. After a moment of silence, Gray said with a solemn expression. Following Gray's words, the atmosphere in the room became oppressive. Everyone could feel Gray's fear towards this force, because this fear was already written on Gray's face. Glancing at the few people in the room, Gray asked, "Do you know what is the realm after the magic light level?" Even the books of the Empire did not record it. Sophia and the other 3 looked at each other and shook their heads. It was not that their knowledge was shallow, but because the environment had limited their horizons. Even the books passed down from the Empire did not record or describe the realm above the magic light level. Warrior of Destruction. Magic light warrior's strength increases 5 times, which means after 5 transformations, they are Warrior of Destruction. Warrior of Destruction. Sophia, Francis, Hillia, and Glenwy Austin could not help but recite this name, with a trace of horror in the depths of their eyes. Destruction, destruction until death. This was a word that was filled with pure destruction. It represented that one side possessed a power that the other side could not contend against. Since the realm above the magic light level was called Warrior of Destruction, then it must have the power to bring about destruction corresponding to its name. Just hearing the name made them feel an indescribable pressure. It was conceivable that the battle strength of such a realm must be extremely terrifying. There is more than one such existence in the Holy Temple of Light. Under the gaze of Sophia and the others, Gray's face was as calm as water as he stated a fact. There is more than one who has surpassed the magic light level. Sophia, Francis, Hillia, and Glenwy all gasped. There was more than one such existence. With just a comparison, they could clearly feel the strength of the Holy Temple of Light. The other party's strength made them feel like they were being pressured to the point of suffocation. The atmosphere fell into silence. The few of them could not help but be shocked by this shocking news to the point of speechlessness. Fortunately, with the restrictions of the plane's laws, the strongest strength that can descend to this world is only at the first level of the magic light level. Gray sighed, let alone Sophia and the others. Even Gray himself was deeply shocked by the strength of the Radiant Saint Hall. Compared to the Warriors of Destruction, the strength he could be proud of was nothing. The only fortunate thing was that due to the restrictions of the planar laws, existences beyond the first level of magic light could not descend into this world. Sometimes he could not help but wonder if the existence of the planar laws was a mechanism to protect the weak. If the powerhouses of the source world could descend upon a plane without any qualms, all the original life in the plane would probably be wiped out. In order to prevent such a situation from happening, the plane naturally evolved such rules during its evolution. Gray, how's the situation on the other side of the world barrier that connects to the source world? After a long while, Francis took a deep breath and exhaled a mouthful of turbid air before asking. There haven't been any new descenders yet. They probably haven't noticed that the 5th organization has been destroyed, but I think it'll happen soon. As time goes on, the Radiant Saint Hall will definitely become suspicious and send people to investigate. Gray said, are there enough guards? If there aren't enough, the Jewel Kingdom can send some people over. We can't let the Descenders escape. Otherwise, when they recover their strength, it will be a huge problem. The Gem Queen Glenwy Austin's delicate face was filled with worry. No problem. It's enough to deal with. Gray shook his head. Even if his strength was suppressed after the Descenders, he still had the strength of a first-level king. Unless they sent a king-level existence, those below the king level would not be of much help. In the battle with the Flame Kingdom and the 5th organization, the Purple Moon Kingdom and the Jewel Kingdom had lost a lot of king-level existences. It was already difficult for them to send a king-level existence, so he directly refused. All of a sudden, Gray's face twitched, and a slight change appeared on his face. What's wrong? Although the change on Gray's face was not big, Sophia still noticed it and asked in confusion. The people of the Radiant Saint Hall are likely to descend. Gray hesitated for a moment, but he still said it in the end. Earlier, he had sensed a communication from Bart, who stood guard near the planar barrier. Although he was unable to understand what Bart was trying to convey due to the great distance, the emergency that had occurred near the planar barrier could only mean that the people of the Radiant Saint Hall had arrived. What? The people of the Radiant Saint Hall have descended? Hearing this news, Sophia and the others stood up immediately. Their eyes were wide open, and their faces were grave and serious. Although they were also very curious about how Gray got the news from them. Since Gray did not say, they naturally would not ask. Moreover, Compared to how Gray got the news, they were more concerned about the people of the Radiant St. Hall descending. Sorry, I have to go and confirm it. Gray apologized to Sophia. This time, he had come to attend the banquet, but with such a thing happening, he was not sure if he could make it in time. I'll go with you, Francis said with a serious expression and a firm tone. I'll go too. Sophia, Hilya, and Jelenway also said the same, unable to persuade them. In the end, the 5 of them were transported to the edge of the planar barrier together. Rumble, rumble. As soon as the 5 of them arrived near the planar barrier, they immediately heard a huge rumble. A large amount of ice sputtered, and the ground was filled with huge potholes over 100 meters in diameter. In some places, even the earth and rocks buried deep underground were exposed. In the distance, an old man with a blade was fighting with 4 people. No, to be precise, the old man with the blade was torturing and killing the 4 people. The 4 of them tried to escape many times, but they were all slashed back by the old man's blade, and a serious wound was added to their bodies, with blood flowing out. The old man with the blade was naturally Derek, who had been aged by Gray with his time ability, and the 4 people being tormented and killed should be the descenders of the Radiant St. Hall. How many people have descended? Did anyone escape? After confirming that the 4 of them were completely within Derek's ability to deal with, Gray did not join the battle. Instead, he asked Bart and the others, Sir Gray, only these 4 people have descended, and they are all here. After bowing respectfully to Gray, Bart shook his head and said, The people of the Radiant St. Hall have really descended. Following beside Gray, Sophia and the others looked at the battle in the distance with their scalps tingling. The aftermath of the battle was everywhere, and everything within a few kilometers was within the range of the impact. The one who caused all this was an old man with a blade, and the other party's battle prowess shocked and astonished them. Every strike seemed to be hammering on their chests, making them feel deeply shocked. Born in the royal family, their vision was naturally extremely high, and they could naturally see that the battle prowess displayed by the old man had already surpassed the thrice metamorphosis king tier. Gray, is that old man's battle prowess already comparable to magic light? Francis forced his open mouth to close and asked with a slightly dry mouth. Yes, he was originally a member of the 5th faction. Because the blood technique he cultivated had the characteristics of strength, he could unleash the battle prowess of magic light. So, I changed the target of my corpse control ability to him. Gray nodded and explained. Even the controlled object has the battle prowess of magic light. Francis smiled bitterly and looked at the others, and they all had the same bitter smile on their faces. Magic light, an existence that could destroy a country alone, and the Scarlet Kingdom was the best example. And the other party's battle prowess was not only enough to beat several magic light, but he could also control objects that had the battle prowess of magic light. In the distance, 2 of the 4 suspected Radiant St. Hall's descenders were already dead, and only 2 were still resisting with difficulty. Suddenly, Hilya pointed at a man in golden battle armor who was fighting with Derek, slightly surprised. Look at that person's blood beast ability. Hearing the reminder, Gray, Sophia, Francis, and Glenwy Austin all looked over, and then they could not help but show a trace of surprise in their eyes. Damn it, what the hell is going on? Feeling the burning pain from the many wounds on his body, Scott roared sullenly and angrily. He stabbed out with the spear in his hand, and a golden light hit the opponent, but it could not hurt the opponent at all. He was a member of the Radiant St. Hall, and an elite among them, because the blood technique he cultivated was a high-level blood technique, even in the Radiant St. Hall. He was also one of the candidates for the top-secret mission to sneak into this plane last time. However, he was eliminated because he needed to have extremely high attainments in runes. In the end, for people with mediocre strength were chosen instead. Because of his relationship with the highest level, he knew the importance of the mission to the Radiant St. Hall, and he knew that after completing the mission, he would receive extremely generous rewards, which was why he was depressed for a long time. But just a few days ago, he was lucky enough to be chosen as the 2nd batch of descenders. He could not help but be excited, and secretly decided that he must complete the mission beautifully to get the generous rewards. However, He never imagined that as soon as they arrived, they would be ambushed. Moreover, the one who ambushed them had a combat strength comparable to Demon Shine's. This was like a heavy blow to his head. Was it really impossible for Demon Shine to be born in this world? Puff! The sound of flesh and blood being cut sounded. He looked sideways and saw that the last of his companions had also died under the enemy's sword, and he was the only one left. Who the hell are you? How dare you be an enemy of the Radiant St. Hall? Scott was not as fast as the opponent, so he tried his best to hide his fear. Unfortunately, what greeted him was a fierce sword, and he was smashed into the ground with another heavy wound. Swish! The snow-white blade slashed at his neck, but just when he thought he was about to die, the blade stopped and was replaced by a foot that stepped on his body, making him unable to move. Although it looks like an elemental ability, it's definitely not one of the 10 types of elemental abilities. Gray supported his chin with one hand. The reason why Derek did not kill him in the end was naturally because of his orders. The opponent's ability had piqued his interest. The opponent's ability looked very similar to the blood technique of the Flame Kingdom, but it was clearly not. When the blood technique of the Flame Kingdom was used, it would show the form of flames, but the opponent's ability did not have the form of flames, and instead looked like a pure beam of light. This piqued the interest of him and Sophia, so they decided not to kill him for now, and to use him for questioning. Chapter 609. Which force are you from? How dare you go against the Holy Temple of Light? Sensing that Gray and the others were approaching, Scott turned his head with difficulty and roared at Gray and the others in a threatening manner. He didn't recognize Derek, partly because he had only met Derek a few times and wasn't familiar with him, and partly because Derek's appearance had aged greatly and changed greatly. In his opinion, a person with the strength of magic light couldn't be a native of this world. He must be from another force in the source world. He just didn't know how Derek managed to sneak in. After all, there were powerhouses from the Holy Temple of Light guarding outside. You don't need to know that. A prisoner should have the consciousness of a prisoner. Gray coldly glanced at the man. In the next moment, the knife in Derek's hand slashed across the man's body, and a small piece of flesh was immediately cut off. The intense pain caused the man to involuntarily groan. Tell me, why did the Holy Temple of Light send you here? Don't even think about it. Don't think you can force me to submit like this. The screams continued to ring out intermittently and only stopped after a long while. At this time, the man was already covered in cold sweat due to the intense pain. His body was covered in blood, and his hair was stuck together with sweat and blood. He looked extremely miserable. So, have you made up your mind? Gray looked at the man indifferently. He didn't need to be polite to the people from the Holy Temple of Light. After all, they wanted to destroy the entire plane and the place where they lived. No matter how ruthless they were, they wouldn't go overboard. Oh, Scott panted heavily. He was no longer as tough as before. It wasn't that he wasn't tough enough, but that the pain of having his flesh cut off piece by piece was unbearable for ordinary people. Now, he only hoped that Lindley could give him relief after asking him the questions so that he wouldn't continue to suffer like this. Tell me, why did the Holy Temple of Light send you here? There's been no news about the companions who came here before. The Holy Temple of Light sent us here to check the situation. Scott replied while panting heavily. Now, he naturally understood why there was no news about the companions who came here before. However, it was obvious that he couldn't send the news back. As expected, they have already noticed the abnormality here. The hearts of Sophia and the others could not help but sink when they heard that. The Radiant St. Hall had already sensed the abnormality here and had begun to take action. They believed that the 4 of them would definitely not be the last ones to descend. More people would probably descend afterwards. What was the Blood Fiend ability you used earlier? Gray did not ask too much about the Radiant St. Hall. He had already gained a good understanding of the Radiant St. Hall from Merrill. He asked about their Blood Beast abilities. This was something that he, Sophia, and the others were rather curious about. You are not from the Source World. Scott looked at Gray in surprise when he heard Gray's question. The ability he had just used was one of the signature abilities of the Radiant Saint Hall. It was impossible for any organization in the Origin world that had contact with the Radiant Saint Hall to not know about it. I'm the one asking you, not the other way around. Gray snorted coldly. Derek's foot on the man's body immediately became heavier. The man was almost out of breath. Derek did not care that this would expose their identity as an organization that was not from the Source world, because he did not want to let the man live. Tell me, what ability was that? That was the Golden Light ability. Golden Light ability? Gray and the others looked at each other. Then, Gray continued to ask, tell me the characteristics of this ability in detail. It's a hybrid ability formed by the combination of fire and metal abilities. It has the scorching heat of fire and the penetrative power of metal. It's enough to fight against a blood warrior of a higher level. A sense of superiority naturally appeared on Scott's face. As a blood warrior who practiced the hybrid blood technique, his combat strength was enough to crush those in the same realm as him and those in a higher realm. This had always been his sense of superiority. Even though he had become a prisoner, this sense of superiority could not be erased. The combination of fire and metal abilities can form the Golden Light ability. Gray did not comment on the man's sense of superiority. The ability to combine fire and metal to form the Golden Light ability was indeed an eye-opener for him. But it would be too ridiculous to rely on such a combination of two abilities to create a sense of superiority in front of him. Sophia and the others had similar thoughts as Gray. Although they didn't know exactly how many elements Gray's current mixed ability was, it was inevitable that his combat strength would surpass the other party's Golden Light ability. In front of Gray, they felt a sense of superiority. Those who didn't know were fearless. After asking some more questions, it was not surprising that the other party did not master the complete Golden Light ability blood technique. The core formula of this blood technique was in the hands of the Holy Temple of Light. This was the most common control method used by the higher-ups. Without this method, even if the cultivation method and the totem style were mastered, they could not practice it. However, this was not a problem for Gray. After all, if Gray wanted to implant the bloodline, he did not need the cooperation of drugs. However, even if the other party had drawn out the cultivation method and the totem style of the blood technique, Gray did not dare to practice it. After all, he could not verify whether the cultivation method and the totem style were real or not. Practicing it randomly was very dangerous. Well, since you have answered many questions, I'll give you a quick death. Seeing that he could not get any more information from the other party, Gray was ready to give the other party a quick death. Before he could control it, Gray would never let the people of the Holy Temple of Light live. At this moment, whoosh! Suddenly, not far away, a tall and skinny man who looked like a corpse suddenly jumped up. His 5 fingers stretched out and slightly bent, grabbing at Gray like a sharp claw. He was not completely dead, or it could be said that he pretended to be dead to deceive Derek. When he heard that Gray was about to kill his companions, he suddenly attacked Gray. From the conversation just now, he could tell that Gray was the one in charge of these people. Therefore, he decided to capture Gray and force the others to hold back, fighting for a chance to escape. Looks like he's pretending to be dead. Facing the tall and skinny man who pounced at him, Gray's lips curled into a cold smile. With infrared perception, other than an extremely small number of ability users who could escape from his perception, others could not disguise themselves in front of him. Therefore, he had already known that the other party was not dead. He was just not sure if the other party had fainted or pretended to be dead. However, now he was sure that the other party had not fainted, but was pretending to be dead, waiting for an opportunity to counterattack. Whoosh! A purple ray of light shot out from Gray's body, colliding with the pouncing man's body. Buzz! Shrouded by an inexplicable force, the lanky man's body suddenly staggered. When he came back to his senses, he instantly felt extremely uncomfortable on his face. He stretched out his hand to touch his face, and his originally smooth face was actually full of wrinkles. Gee, what ability is this? The tall and skinny man's eyes widened, and he looked horrified. He did not understand what had happened to his body, but he gritted his teeth and showed a fierce look again, fiercely pouncing at Gray again. Although his combat power has been suppressed, his lifespan should not have changed. Looking with interest at the tall and skinny man who continued to pounce at him, Gray concluded in his heart. The lifespan of a king-level warrior under the power of the rules of time was absolutely impossible to withstand a blow. The other party could withstand a blow and not die, which meant that the other party's lifespan should still be at the magic light level. Whoosh! Unhurriedly, a purple light once again swept out from in front of Gray and collided with the tall and skinny man. Buzz! The lanky man was once again enveloped by the purple light. At a rate visible to the naked eye, his already aged body became even older. His originally straight back became hunched, and his body was wrapped in a layer of old skin. His appearance was slightly frightening. Thud! The look in his eyes became turbid and dim, and the tall and skinny man fell down with a thud just over 10 meters away from Gray. This time, he was not pretending to be dead, but completely dead, because Gray had already felt that the other party's body temperature was rapidly dropping. He relied on this ability to defeat the fifth force. Although they had already learned from Diphony Violet that Gray had mastered this ability and relied on it to defeat the fifth force, Sophia and the others could not help but feel a burst of astonishment. This method of aging a person made them deeply shocked. This was no longer a simple ability. It was more like something that was of a higher standard than an ability. This, suppressed on the ground and struggling to tilt his head, Scott's face was full of horror. His eyes were wide open, and his voice was full of horror and disbelief. The power of the rules of life? No, this is the power of the rules of time. How could you have mastered it? Possessing the mixed ability of two elements, the golden light, gave him a sense of superiority. Even if he had become a prisoner, this sense of superiority still existed. But now, this sense of superiority was torn to pieces. As an aboriginal, the other party had mastered the power of the rules of time. Compared to the other party's ability, his mixed ability of two elements was simply not qualified to be mentioned in the same breath. You actually recognized it. Hearing the man's exclamation, Gray looked at the man with interest. He originally thought that he had squeezed out the other party's remaining value, but now it seemed that there was value to be squeezed out again. The corners of his mouth rose slightly, revealing a devilish smile in the eyes of the man. Tell me, what do you know about the power of rules? Chapter 6:10. Which force are you from? Scott was no longer so sure about his initial judgment. It was impossible for a person with rule ability to be a plain native, no matter how he thought about it. That's not what you need to know. Gray looked down at Scott with indifference in his blue eyes. Your wounds must be very painful, right? If you don't want to die too painfully, tell me everything you know about rule abilities, and I'll give you a quick death. The wounds on his body made Scott's forehead break out in a cold sweat. He gritted his teeth so hard that they were bleeding. Only the top powerhouses of the temple can come into contact with rule abilities. I don't know much. Just tell me what you know. Gray said faintly. He did not care that the other party knew limited. It was already an unexpected surprise that the other party knew about rule abilities. Rule abilities are a mixture of 5 types of elemental, physical, and soul abilities. They have power far beyond ordinary abilities and are enough to fight across multiple realms. At this point, Scott secretly glanced at Gray. The reason why they had lost contact with Derek and the other 3 must have been that this person had killed them with time rule ability. What else? Gray naturally knew that rule abilities were a mixture of 5 types of abilities. After all, that was how his rule abilities came about. He continued to ask, I also heard that this ability is an opportunity to become a rule powerhouse. A rule powerhouse? What is a rule powerhouse? Gray interrupted Scott. It's a powerhouse who can control rules. They control rules, integrate with rules, and coexist with rules. Rumor has it that every rule powerhouse has mastered at least one type of rule. The more rules they master, the stronger they are. The questioning ended very quickly. As he said, Scott did not know much. That level was no longer something he could come into contact with. If he did not have some connections at the highest level, it was impossible for him to know this kind of information. Gray kept his promise, killed the other party in the least painful way, and buried the body. Among the four people's belongings, the four weapons that were likely to be gold weapons were the most valuable. Perhaps they had considered the uniqueness and danger of this plane's rules and had not brought all the valuable items. First, it's a destruction warrior, and then it's a rule-class powerhouse. Today's an eye-opener. Francis's face was full of emotion. The news he heard today made him feel as if his horizons were suddenly opened. Originally, in his opinion, magic light was already an extremely impressive existence. But today, he learned that there was an even stronger destruction warrior above it, and even a rule-level powerhouse. His vision had been greatly expanded. It was indeed an eye-opener. Gem Queen Gallenway Austin was overwhelmed with emotions as she wore a look of amazement. I really want to pay a visit to the origin world. It's a pity that the Radiant St. Hall has sealed up the other side. Jin Chun sighed. Gray was also excited. Scott's description of a rule-level powerhouse made him yearn for it. Controlling the rules, merging with the rules, and coexisting with the rules. These few words vividly describe the characteristics of a rule-level powerhouse. He could not help but have an extreme desire and yearn for that realm. If I can reach the level of magic light, coupled with my rule-level ability and that gold weapon, I wonder if I have the ability to break through the blockade. He fell into deep thought, thinking about whether he could break through the blockade of the powerhouses of the Temple of Light in his strongest state theoretically. Rule-level ability? Sophia murmured this word softly, and her eyes flashed. Let's go back quickly. If we don't go back now, the birthday banquet will really be ruined. Hylia glanced at the sky and said helplessly to everyone who was sighing. Using spatial teleportation, the five of them returned to Sophia's residence before the banquet began. The banquet was held as usual, but during the banquet, the five of them were more or less absent-minded. After hearing about a wider world, a sprout grew in the depths of their hearts. It was a desire for a wider world. A few days later, in the palace of the Red Desert, swish, 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 ray after ray of purple light was sprinkled on the altar by Gray. Crack, crack. From the moment Gray sprinkled the purple light, cracks would appear on the surface of the white barrier from time to time. It was like glass that had been cracked but did not completely fall apart. However, it was very obvious that it was not far from completely falling apart. As Gray sprinkled the last purple light, the cracks on the surface of the white barrier were already densely packed and intertwined with each other, as if countless strands were growing chaotically. Crack! Suddenly, an extremely crisp sound rang out. Then, the white barrier turned into pieces of white light and splashed in all directions. Pung, pung, pung. Gray hurriedly put on his black armor and alloyed his body. Even so, he could not help but be knocked hundreds of meters away by the splashing white light. The power of each of these white light balls was not inferior to the level of magic light, or even above magic light. If it was anyone else here, even a magic light warrior, they would very likely be killed by the attack just now. When the smoke and dust dispersed, the white barrier could no longer be seen on the altar that was full of traces of decay. There was only a golden sword-shaped weapon floating in the air. Patter, patter, patter. Breathing heavily, Gray walked up the altar to the golden sword-shaped weapon. Without the protection of the white barrier, the murderous aura became even more intense. With every step forward, it was as if he was walking in a torrential flood. All the hair on his body stood on end, as if countless sharp blades were pointing at him. Finally, he walked up to the golden sword-shaped weapon. The monstrous murderous aura made him feel like he was facing a surging wave. He stretched out his hand and grabbed the hilt of the golden sword-shaped weapon. Ha! A cold feeling passed into his palm. He grabbed the hilt of the golden sword-shaped weapon in his hand. He actually touched this golden sword-shaped weapon. With a slight pull, the golden sword-shaped weapon was pulled out of its suspended state and completely fell into his hand. The weight of the sword was supported by his hand. He truly felt that he had obtained this golden sword-shaped weapon. I finally obtained it. Looking at the golden sword-shaped weapon in his hand and carefully scanning the beautiful patterns on its surface, Gray's heart beat wildly. The golden sword-shaped weapon with a magic weapon that required a powerful organization like the Radiant Saint Palace to spend 1,000 years to repair. It could be imagined that this magic weapon's grade would be extremely high. Although this golden sword-shaped weapon was not completely repaired because the final blood sacrifice had not been carried out, but even if it could not be repaired, the power it could unleash should surpass that of a golden weapon. What? Gray tried to infuse the golden sword-shaped weapon with the power of blood. In the next moment, he could not help but cry out with a pale face. The little remaining power of blood was instantly sucked dry by the golden sword-shaped weapon. The exhaustion of the power of blood caused his head to turn black. An intense wave of dizziness hit him, and he only recovered after a while. However, the golden sword-shaped weapon that had absorbed his power of blood did not have any changes on the surface. Clearly, this level of power of blood was not enough to activate the golden sword-shaped weapon. Even if my power of blood was at its peak, I'm afraid it's still not enough to activate the golden sword-shaped weapon. Shaking his head slightly, Gray judged. In just an instant, all his power of blood had been sucked dry. It could be imagined that the amount of power of blood needed to activate this golden sword-shaped weapon would be enormous. He estimated that even if he was at his peak, he would not be able to activate this golden sword-shaped weapon. He was at the king level, yet he could not even activate it. It could be imagined how high the grade of this golden sword-shaped weapon was. It had to be a magic weapon that far surpassed a golden weapon. After confirming that he was unable to activate the golden sword-shaped weapon, Gray withdrew the power of blood that had been infused into the golden sword-shaped weapon. He was prepared to put the golden sword-shaped weapon away and use spatial teleportation to return. Whoosh! At this moment, an unexpected scene, or rather a strange scene, appeared in front of Gray's eyes. As the power of blood was withdrawn, the golden sword-shaped weapon actually softened in front of Gray's eyes. Like a ball of liquid, it drilled into Gray's hand. Then, it drilled into Gray's body through his hand. What's going on? Gray was shocked. A sword had drilled into his body. No matter how he thought about it, this was not a good thing. He hurriedly reversed the flow of the power of blood and let it flow into his arm again. Suddenly, an unexpected scene appeared again. In his hand, the golden liquid gushed out and turned into a golden sword-shaped weapon. It looked exactly the same as before. It had a metallic texture to it. When he knocked on it, there was a clanging sound. It was no different from an ordinary weapon. He withdrew the power of blood again. Then he saw the golden sword-shaped weapon turn into liquid and drilled into his body through his hand. Whoosh! Whoosh! Withdraw the power of blood. 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 After a few rounds, Gray confirmed a fact. This golden weapon was different from any other weapon he had seen before. It could be stored into his body. Moreover, it did not affect his body at all. At least, he did not feel it. Magic weapons can be stored into the body. What he had encountered today had completely overturned Gray's understanding of magic weapons. It gave him a new understanding of magic weapons. Do all high-level magic weapons have this characteristic? Or is it only this golden weapon that has this characteristic? Gray urgently wanted to find someone from the Temple of Light to ask what was going on. Unfortunately, he had already killed everyone. He did not regret killing these people. The existence of these people was too dangerous. The risk of imprisoning them was too great. It was completely not worth it. However, he could not help but faintly look forward to the people from the Temple of Light descending again. 15_15674/ Chapter 611. Within the Radiant Temple, a dignified man sat on a golden throne. The ceiling, walls, and floor were all made of crystal. The man wore a white robe inlaid with golden threads. His eyebrows were like swords, and his eyes were as bright as the stars. His face seemed to have been carved with a knife, and his golden hair was as dazzling as flames. He looked extremely young, as if he was only in his 20s or 30s. However, in reality, he had already looked like this more than 1,000 years ago. Time seemed to have stopped flowing on him. Sitting on the throne, the man naturally became the center of the hall. This was a man who would become the center of attention no matter where he went. He was the Temple of Light's temple master, Alex Bader. On his left and right sat 6 people. There were a total of 12 men and women on both sides. There were young women, old men, handsome middle-aged men, and plump women. Their appearances showed that they were of different ages, but without exception, there was an unimaginably terrifying power that lay dormant within their bodies. It was as if a colossal beast that could destroy the heavens and earth was hibernating within their bodies. We've also lost contact with the second group of people. We can be sure that something has happened to the realm where the planar origin formation was set up. Glancing at the 12 people present, Alex Bader's finger tapped lightly on the armrest of the throne as he spoke calmly. His attitude was as if he was talking about something unimportant. However, in reality, repairing that magic weapon was the most important matter for the Radiant Temple in the past 1,000 years. For this, the Radiant Temple had already begun to plan for it more than 1,000 years ago. It's impossible for a realm that can't even produce magic light to have the ability to make us lose 2 groups of people in a row. I suspect that people from other organizations have infiltrated. A middle-aged man with a brown beard and an old-fashioned face frowned slightly as he spoke. But there's only one entrance to the realm, and it's always been closely monitored. It's impossible for other organizations to infiltrate without alerting us. A young woman with a hot figure in red spoke with a doubtful voice. The loss of the origin energy will definitely cause the realm barrier to weaken. Could it be that a void beast took the opportunity to invade that realm? An old man with a head full of silver hair and a face as rosy as a baby's voiced his doubts. Void beast! Hearing the old man's suspicion, the faces of everyone in the hall could not help but turn serious. The void beast was a beast that lived in the void. It had an extremely strong devouring and plundering nature. Once it invaded a dimension with life, it would plunder all life in the dimension. In the end, it would plunder the origin of the entire dimension, causing the dimension to be completely destroyed. It was the natural enemy of all flesh and blood life forms, including humans. Not only would it destroy life, but it would also destroy the living space. The various temples in the source world had different standards of conduct. Some were biased towards the good camp, while others were biased towards the evil camp. However, the general rule was to exterminate the void beast as soon as it was discovered. One could imagine how fearful they were of the void beast. If the void beasts really invade, then this matter will be troublesome. The old-fashioned middle-aged man with a brown beard had a solemn expression. Only those at the first level of magic light are allowed to enter that plane. Moreover, after entering, their strength will be forcefully suppressed. This level of strength is not enough to fight against the nothingness beast that has already matured. It might not be the void beasts. There are ways to enter the dimension without going through the entrance. As long as one has grasped the spatial rules of order, one can enter the dimension without going through the entrance. A plump middle-aged woman in a purple dress said, "Spatial rules of order? Are you saying that the temporal temple is behind all of this?" A young woman in a red dress with a hot figure frowned. "It might not be the temporal temple. It's just that this possibility is the greatest. After all, the temporal temple isn't the only one who has grasped the spatial rules of order." The plump middle-aged woman in a purple dress shook her head. "I still think that the possibility of the void beasts is greater. We have sealed off all information about that dimension, and it's listed as the temple's top secret. The other forces shouldn't know about it." The old man with a head full of silver hair and a face as rosy as a baby's insisted on his opinion. Many people agreed with his opinion. An intense discussion broke out in the hall as they revolved around the possibility of an external force invading and the nothingness beasts invading. At this moment, a hand was gently raised. As the hand was raised, the hall fell silent. The 12 people all looked at the owner of the hand, the leader of the Radiant Saint Hall, Alex Bader. Whether it's the invasion of the outside forces or the void beasts, it's imperative to send another group of people into that dimension. I've decided to send Aurora. The leader of the Radiant Temple, Alex Bader, said, Isn't it too risky to send a saintess? The plump middle-aged woman in a purple dress frowned. The others in the hall could not help but frown as well. The saintess or saint was the title given to the most talented person in the younger generation of the temple. If it was a woman, they would be called the saintess. If it was a man, they would be called the saintess. They were usually powerful competitors for the position of temple master in the future. The most talented person in the younger generation of the Radiant Temple was a woman, which was why she was called the saintess. Her talent ranked towards the top among all the saintesses and saints in the history of the Radiant Temple. Not only was her talent for cultivation impressive, but she also possessed a precious affinity physique. Through her affinity physique, she had already gained the ability to comprehend the laws of light. She was the person most likely to reach the laws of light in the past 1,000 years. The Radiant Temple obviously protected people like her extremely strictly. As a result, everyone could not help but worry when they heard that they were sending her. Without tempering herself, no matter how powerful she is, she's just a flower in a greenhouse. Moreover, she applied for this trip herself. The Lord of the Temple of Light, Alex Bader, shook his head. In the forest of the Fergus family's forbidden grounds, the figure of a huge black lizard over 20 meters long stood on all fours. It radiated with a heavy pressure. All the birds and beasts in the forest prostrated themselves on the ground as they trembled. After a long time, the shadow of the black lizard collapsed, and the strong pressure that had covered the entire forest was swept away. All the birds and beasts staggered up from the ground, as if they had collapsed. After washing off his sweat and changing into a set of clean clothes, Gray sat on the floor covered in a red carpet. He did his best to clear his mind and comprehend the imprint of the laws of Berserk in his head. Gray had asked Merrill about the details of blood skills in detail, so he gained an even clearer understanding of the imprint of the laws of Berserk in his head. Laws were the manifestation of laws. They were a description of laws. Laws could not be seen or touched, but they were universal laws that truly existed in the world. Their existence was like the various classical laws from Gray's previous life. Laws were the product of various classical laws being described in the form of inscriptions. Regular people could understand and use the laws to a certain extent. Of course, this kind of use was one-sided and extremely small. There were various restrictions, and it was far from comparable to experts of the laws. In reality, blood skills were the products or byproducts of experts of the laws of Berserk. Every blood skill represented a type of law, and they all represented an expert of the laws of Berserk's understanding and research of the law. Crack! An hour later, Gray ended his visualization. He seemed to have gained something in his head, yet it also seemed like he had gained nothing. He stood up and walked to the empty space outside the wooden hut. He stretched his body and stretched his muscles. It was already spring, and the bright sunlight shone on his body. It was warm, like a gentle caress. A fragrant wind blew into Gray's nose. It was the fragrance of Barbara's expensive shampoo. She smiled gently when she saw Gray. She wore a green lotus leaf dress, and her long brown hair was tied up. She gave off the aura of a mature woman. "It's quite lively over at the castle. Is there some good news?" Gray asked with a smile. "Yes, Miss Daniela is pregnant." Barbara replied with a smile. "No wonder. This is a good thing. Send some tonics over for me later." Gray was slightly surprised. Daniela was the wife of Elise, Gray's second brother in name. Although Gray did not have a good impression of Elise, he was still very willing to see the family prosper. "All right, I'll send it over later." Barbara smiled and nodded, but there was a trace of loneliness in the depths of her eyes. Gray saw this trace of loneliness, and he could not help but feel a trace of guilt. He knew that Barbara really wanted a child, and he did not despise the idea of having an illegitimate child. Unfortunately, Barbara was only a mid-level blood warrior now, while he was already a king. The huge gap between their realms made it very difficult for the two of them to have a child. Nobles always liked couples of equal social status. It was not only because of the equality of status, but also because of the consideration of children. Crack! A black crystal embedded in the bracelet on Gray's wrist shattered with a crack, completely turning into powder. Gray took out another black crystal from the purple ring with a slight heartache and embedded it in the bracelet. Last one. Gray had obtained a total of 6 magic light grade black crystals from the 6 magic light grade black beasts, and this was the last one. The effects of 5 black crystals in a row were also obvious. In just a few months, his realm had already risen to the peak of the first layer of the King realm. He was not far from the second layer of the King realm. They're finally here. A buzzing sound rang out in his mind. It was like the static of a radio station, vague and indistinct. Hearing this sound, Gray could not help but feel his heart skip a beat. The people of the Temple of Light had descended once again. He called out to Barbara and immediately prepared to teleport over. Suddenly, his body froze. Dead. At almost the same time, apart from Bart, he had lost contact with everyone else. Simply put, they were all dead. Chapter 6:12. The planar barrier was as black as ink, so deep that not a single ray of light could be seen. It was a natural barrier that separated the plane from the outside world. It was a protective umbrella for the weak and a cage for the strong. Suddenly, the place where the planar barrier connected to the origin world shook violently. Then, like a bubble that had been punctured, a hole about 2 to 3 meters in diameter appeared. Land could be seen on both sides of the hole, except that one side was a world of ice and snow, while the other side was a scorching desert. Clearly, this hole was connected to the two worlds. My realm really has been suppressed. For people walked out of the hole and entered the world of ice and snow. Their leader was a woman with platinum-colored hair. She was dressed in platinum-colored battle armor. She was extremely tall, and her legs were long and slender, but they were also firm. She had an oval face that was delicately sculpted. Her fair skin was so delicate that it looked like it could be broken by the wind. There was not a single flaw on her face. Even a most picky artist would find it difficult to find a single flaw on her face. Below her head was a slender and graceful body. Her breasts were high, and her waist was slender and round. She had the most enchanting curves. This was a perfect woman who seemed to be loved by all. She was the saintess of the Radiant Temple, Aurora. Swish! Just as she walked out of the plane passage, a shiny blade suddenly slashed at her at high speed, aiming for her seemingly delicate throat. The person who attacked was naturally Derek. Under the control of Gray's corpse control ability, Derek faithfully carried out Gray's order to kill everyone who appeared through the planar barrier. Oomph. The wind from the blade made her platinum hair dance, and her face hurt. However, there was no panic in Aurora's eyes. With a cold snort, the sword at her waist was unsheathed at lightning speed. Platinum light wrapped around the sword as it met the incoming blade. Clang! With a loud bang, the violent tremors caused countless cracks to appear on the icy ground in the surroundings. Following that, a figure retreated several dozen meters before stabilizing himself. The one who was forced back wasn't Aurora, whose realm was suppressed. Instead, it was Derek, whose strength was comparable to magic lights. While he was retreating, he was hit in the waist by the platinum-colored longsword. As Gray was no longer able to use alloy form, a deep wound appeared on his waist. It was hard to imagine that the other party was still able to suppress and even injure Derek when his cultivation was suppressed. Not good. The person who descended this time was actually able to injure Derek. This is bad. Hurry and inform Lord Gray. Seeing that the leader of the four had actually injured Derek with a single blow, Bart and the others who were watching from afar were shocked. They hurriedly contacted Gray. We were attacked by magic light as soon as we arrived. No wonder the first 2 groups of people died here. Who are you? No, that's not right. It's not a person, but a corpse that's being controlled. Aurora glanced at Derek with interest before instructing the other 3 who came with her. The 3 of you go and deal with those little rats over there. Make sure to leave one alive. Yes, Your Highness Saintess. The 3 of them responded respectfully before pouncing towards Bart and the others who were watching from afar. Although Bart and the others were hiding very well, how could they hide from Magic Light's eyes and ears? What's going on? Why are the people who descended this time so strong? Teleporting, Gray quickly rushed to the plane barrier that connected to the origin world. His expression was very gloomy, partly because of the deaths of his subordinates, but also because of the strength of the people who descended this time. Even with Derek around, almost all the people he sent to watch had been wiped out. The people who were sent this time were definitely not simple. Whoosh! After a few teleportations, Gray appeared near the plane barrier that connected to the origin world and saw the people who had descended this time. There were a total of 4 people. 3 of them were standing beside a few mutilated corpses. One of them was grabbing a man's neck like an eagle grabbing a chick. The man was coughing violently because he was suffocating. This man was the only survivor, Bart. The last person was a woman with long platinum hair. She was fighting with Derek. At this time, there were several serious wounds on Derek's body. If Derek was a normal person, he would have been seriously injured. Gray used his alloy transformation ability on Derek to strengthen his defense while he pounced on the man who was grabbing Bart. Whoosh! Covered in purple light, Gray's speed reached a terrifying level. In an instant, he appeared beside the man who was grabbing Bart's neck. Whoosh! Gray's longsword was covered in a layer of purple light as he slashed at the man's arm. The man was at the first level of magic light. When Gray appeared, he had already reacted. However, his body was suppressed to the first level of King Realm, so he couldn't react in time. He could only watch as Gray's sword slashed down. Pooh! The longsword wrapped in purple light had the decaying ability of time. It easily cut through the man's magic light level flesh. When it came into contact with his wrist bone, it paused for a moment before cutting through. His entire arm was cut off at the wrist. Blood spurted out like water from a pipe. The power of time acted on the man's body. The man's appearance and body were rapidly aging, but the man didn't notice any of this. The pain of losing his arm was heart-wrenching. He cried out in pain, but soon his voice came to an abrupt stop. The purple longsword turned and slashed across his throat like a knife cutting through butter. He wanted to make a sound, but because his throat was cut, he couldn't make a sound. Blood spurted out from his throat. His remaining hand reflexively covered his throat. The man's eyes were filled with fear as he fell down powerlessly. Richard, the other 2 of the 3, had fear in their eyes. They held their weapons in front of their chest and quickly retreated as if they were avoiding a snake. The sudden turn of events stunned them. In the blink of an eye, their companion had died in front of them. It was so fast that they didn't even have time to save him. What frightened them even more was that when the other party attacked, it was as sharp as a knife cutting through tofu. They also saw the old appearance of their deceased companion. Although their level was suppressed, their magic light level physical defenses were still there. However, under the attack of the other party, their companion's magic light level defenses were as if they didn't exist at all. They were easily cut through. Not only that, but their companion's appearance was also rapidly aging. When he died, his appearance was already that of an old man. This was no ordinary attack at all. This kind of attack could take away a person's lifespan and make them age. Whoosh! The speed at which the 2 retreated was already extremely fast, but Gray's reaction was even faster. He raised his sword, which was wrapped in a purple radiance, and a purple radiance swept towards the 2 of them at a speed even faster than the lightning radiance. Seeing the purple light coming towards them, the 2 of them, who had already seen how terrifying this kind of purple light was, tried to dodge in horror. However, with their speed suppressed to the first stage of the king level, it was obvious that they couldn't dodge at all. In fact, even if their speed wasn't suppressed and they were still at the first stage of the magic light level, they might not be able to dodge at such a close distance, let alone the 2 of them whose speed was suppressed to the first stage of the king level. The purple light created a ripple in the air. Just as it was about to hit the 2 of them, at this moment, whoosh, a golden light suddenly appeared and collided with the purple light from the side. There was a violent reaction where the 2 collided. It was as if 2 completely opposite substances had collided. Neither side allowed the other to exist. Both sides tried their best to destroy each other. In this kind of wrestling, they destroyed each other and collapsed. Unexpectedly, the damage caused by such a violent reaction was in a very small area. In this small area, everything was instantly vaporized, whether it was ice, snow, or earth under the ice. It wasn't that the two attacks were too weak. The instant vaporization of the surrounding substances was enough to show how terrifying these two attacks were. The reason for this situation was that these two attacks were too condensed. They were like fine iron that had been tempered thousands of times. They only caused damage to the target, but didn't affect the surroundings. He can actually block the power of the rule of time, even though he's gradually being suppressed. Could his blood beast power also be? Gray squinted his eyes at the woman who attacked with the golden light. Under the rules of this plane, the woman's realm must have been suppressed to the first stage of the king realm. Even so, the power of the woman's blood fiend ability was not weaker than hers. What the woman had mastered was most likely a rule-type ability similar to the time rule ability. The rule of time. Looking at Gray, Aurora's eyes were sizing him up. Her flawless face was as calm as a windless lake. Her expression didn't change at all, but in reality, her heart wasn't as calm as it seemed. As a possessor of the affinity physique, she already had the power of the rule of time. Although she didn't usually show it and always treated her companions as equals, in reality, that kind of pride was already hidden deep within her. And now, someone who also had the power of the rule of time had appeared in front of her. This made her curious and fearful. She was curious about the other party's identity and fearful of the other party's strength. You're from the Space-Time Temple? You're from the Radiant Temple? In an instant, various thoughts flashed through Gray's mind. In the end, they turned into a rhetorical question. He had never been to the Source World. All the information he knew was from the Radiant Temple that had descended. He naturally didn't know about the Space-Time Temple. But now, it seemed that the Space-Time Temple was a force that could contend with the Radiant Temple. Moreover, their relationship with the Radiant Temple couldn't be said to be good. Since the other party had mistaken him for someone from the Space-Time Temple, he naturally wouldn't deny it. Chapter 613. Elder Deborah has guessed correctly. It really is you who are causing trouble. Aurora stared at Gray with her amber eyes. Gray's question had achieved the desired effect. Aurora did not doubt Gray as a member of the Space-Time Temple. The chances of the Space-Time Temple producing people with the laws of space and time were much higher than the other temples. Although people with the laws of time might not necessarily be from the Space-Time Temple, it was undoubtedly the most likely possibility. You've killed so many people from my Radiant Saint Hall. Even if you're from the Space-Time Temple, you must pay the price. Aurora's face was as cold as frost. Her slender and graceful body exuded a heavy pressure. Right now, she was wearing platinum battle armor and looked as majestic as a princess. She exuded an inviolable aura. Swish! She was enveloped in a layer of platinum light. Afterwards, she began to move at a speed that exceeded ordinary magic light. She turned into a streak of platinum light and rapidly approached Gray. Rule of light. It was related to light, but it wasn't the only rule. People who had this rule would have the characteristics of light, and one of the characteristics of light was speed. Therefore, Aurora also had unparalleled speed with her rule of light. Swish! Although he was surprised by her speed, Gray was confident that he would not lose out to her in terms of speed. Wrapped in purple light, Gray did not retreat. Instead, he advanced towards her. Clang! The sword wrapped in purple light collided with the sword wrapped in platinum light. Violent destruction occurred at the point of collision, and the two figures could not help but retreat from the powerful impact. This is the first time someone has been able to contend against me at the same level of cultivation. Huge cracks appeared on the icy ground below Gray as he retreated. His eyes were filled with indescribable excitement. Basically, all the opponents he had encountered were at a higher level of cultivation than him. He had always fought against those at a higher level of cultivation than him. So he had basically become accustomed to defeating those at a lower level of cultivation than him. Now that he had encountered an opponent at the same level of cultivation as him, he felt slightly excited for some reason. An opponent like that was exactly what he wanted. The Source World actually had such opponents, and there should be quite a few of them. He was looking forward to the boundless Source World more and more. Is this the feeling of fighting against someone who also grasps rule bending ability? Aurora's amber eyes were also filled with excitement. Rule power was a very special ability. It was above ordinary abilities and could display a terrifying power that far exceeded ordinary abilities. Moreover, this ability had a special characteristic, which was that the bloodline only existed in the body of a rule-level blood fiend, and the bloodline of a rule-level blood fiend was obviously not something that a person who was implanted with the bloodline for the first time could withstand. Therefore, it was absolutely impossible to directly obtain the power of laws through a bloodline implantation. Even the great temples were unable to do so. Without a way to directly obtain rule-bending abilities, one could only cultivate a multi-elemental blood technique. Then, one would have to pay a huge price and take a huge risk to suppress the bloodline in their body and implant a new bloodline, finally forming rule-bending abilities. As someone who possessed the affinity body, she did not take a huge risk to successfully implant a new bloodline. She already possessed rule-bending abilities long ago. This uniqueness made her seem extremely special among the younger generation of the Radiant Saint Hall. There was basically no one who could fight her at the same level of cultivation. It was rumored that there were similar existences in the other temples, but they were all tightly protected by their respective temples, so it was impossible for them to clash. Now that an opponent at the same level as her had appeared, she was also excited. Swish! Swish! Turning into a violet streak of light and a platinum streak of light, the two of them basically lunged at each other at the same time. Clang! 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 The sounds of weapons colliding constantly rang out. The violet streak of light and the platinum streak of light intertwined, constantly colliding and separating. It was extremely beautiful, like a violet and platinum firework. The two remaining people of the Radiant Saint Hall and Bart were completely mesmerized. However, it was also extremely dangerous. Although the power was extremely condensed, it did not spread across a large area like regular attacks. However, all matter and even the air in the small area around the two of them had been pulverized by the condensed power, as if it had vanished into thin air. Clang! With another clash, the violet streak of light and the platinum streak of light quickly separated. They stared at each other from over 100 meters away. Their eyes were filled with fanaticism and excitement. Their gazes were like they had seen their prey. Crack! With a crisp sound, countless cracks appeared on the surface of Gray's silver-grade magic weapon. In the end, it completely shattered, leaving only the hilt in his hand. In a clash of magic light, especially a clash of magic light that involved rule-bending abilities, Gray's silver-grade magic weapon was no longer able to withstand the pressure. It was completely destroyed. Tossing away the hilt, Gray extended his consciousness into the violet ring on his finger. Among the 8 people he had killed before, some of them used swords, so their weapons had obviously ended up in Gray's hands as well. Although it could not increase his battle prowess due to the suppression of rule-bending abilities, it was at least tough enough. It would not shatter after a short battle like a silver-grade weapon. He did not plan on using the golden sword to avoid being mistaken for someone from the Space-Time Temple. He hoped to continue misleading them and make them think that the golden sword had ended up in the hands of the higher-ups of the Space-Time Temple. It would be for the best if the Radiant Saint Hall gave up on this plane and withdrew the people guarding it. Then, they would make trouble for the Space-Time Temple instead. Swish! 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 Battle was about using everything possible. Gray believed this, and so did Aurora. She had no intention of letting Gray take out his weapon again. Streaks of platinum light suddenly shot out from her body like platinum spears. With an extremely sharp aura, they attacked Gray. Swish! There was no time to draw his sword. Gray extended his hand and used it as a sword. He swung it forward, and a violet streak of light met the platinum spears. Chi. The violet streak of light blocked all the platinum spears. As it destroyed the platinum spears, it also dissipated. At this moment, swish! A sword radiating platinum light stabbed towards Gray, aiming for his heart. Before it even got close, the sharp aura had already pierced Gray's chest like an invisible sword. Swish! Derek's age body blocked in front of Gray, blocking the sword. In the previous battle, Gray and Aurora were simply too fast. They were so fast that even Derek could not keep up. Now that the battle had slowed down, he finally caught up. Clang! The sharp platinum-colored long sword stabbed into his old body, but the sound of metal clashing could be heard. His aged body paused for a moment and blocked the sword. There was no wound at the place where he was stabbed. There was not even a scratch on his body. What? Aurora's perfect face showed a hint of surprise as her all-out attack did not leave a single wound on Derek's body. She naturally knew how strong Derek's defense was. After all, the severe wounds on Derek's body were a masterpiece. However, Derek's defense had undergone a drastic change in such a short period of time. It was so strong that she could barely injure him. She noticed that there was a silver-gray metallic luster on the surface of Derek's body. It was obvious that he had been strengthened by some kind of physical strengthening ability. This was the real reason why she was surprised. Apart from the time rule ability, he had mastered other abilities. The number of abilities he had mastered surpassed hers. Although it was not another rule ability, it was still extremely terrifying. It was the first time in her life that someone had mastered more abilities than her. Swish! Derek raised the battle sword in his hand. The shiny blade swiftly slashed towards Aurora. Although she was surprised, Aurora's reaction was extremely fast. Her entire body was covered in platinum light. She dodged the swift slash in a flash. However, just as she appeared in a flash, a sword wrapped in purple light slashed towards her throat. The purple light quickly enlarged in her eyes. Taking advantage of the time when Derek blocked the attack, Gray had already taken out his sword from the purple ring and was waiting for an opportunity to attack her. Whoosh! Aurora's entire body was covered in platinum light. Her body seemed to have turned into light as she quickly retreated. However, Gray's slash was not slow either. After all, it was a slash with the help of the time rule. Puff! The platinum light on Aurora's body dissipated. Although it avoided her throat, it still slashed her abdomen. The armor she was wearing was a special magic weapon similar to a magic weapon, but it was different from magic weapons such as swords and sabers. It increased her defense, and under the suppression of the plane's laws, the armor's defense was greatly reduced. The long sword slashed through the battle armor that had been weakened by the rule suppression and left a wound on her abdomen. Surprisingly, the wound was not deep. It was only a shallow scratch. At this moment, Aurora's entire body was covered in silver light. Her entire body seemed to have been poured with silver. She had used the metallization ability. Among the 5 abilities that formed the light rule, one of them was the metallization ability. However, the time rule ability's direct damage was secondary. Its most lethal and terrifying ability was the time rule ability contained in its attacks. Under the influence of the time rule, Aurora's body was slowly aging. No, the word old wasn't appropriate to describe it. She was simply too young. So even under the influence of the time rule, her appearance only changed from a young woman in her 20s to a young woman in her 30s. Her body was filled with a mature charm like a peach. Chapter 614. Is this the time stripping ability of the laws of time? Aurora was surprisingly calm after losing 1 or 200 years of her lifespan. Although she could not see it, she could clearly sense that her body had changed. Her lifespan had been stripped away from her. She did not become furious or fearful when faced with this change. She only felt extremely calm. But this is useless against me. Her lips curled into a sneer as she raised her head slightly, revealing her snow-white neck. At this moment, she gave off a sense of pride. Swish! Dazzling, platinum gold light shone from her body. It was dazzling, filling her with a holy presence. Then, under the dazzling white gold light, the shallow scratch on her body disappeared. Not only that scratch, even her already changed appearance was changing. She rapidly became younger as her stolen lifespan returned to her body. She returned to her original appearance of a young woman in her 20s. She had actually broken free from the influence of the laws of time and returned to her original state. The laws of light were related to light, but they were not just on the level of laws of light. They did not just grant the user with the ability to increase movement speed. There were several other special abilities as well. One of the abilities was to eliminate abnormal states. This abnormal state included injuries on one's body. However, it was not limited to injuries on one's body. One's lifespan, which had been deprived by the time ability, was also classified under this abnormal state. As a result, not only had she recovered from her wounds, but she had even recovered her stolen lifespan. She had returned to her original state before she was attacked by the laws of time. Recovering the stolen lifespan is one of the special abilities of the laws of light. Gray was shocked as he looked at the woman who had become younger again. His understanding of the powers of laws was extremely limited. Although he had managed to obtain some information from the people of the Radiant Saint Hall, it was very clear that the people he asked knew extremely little. They only knew that the Radiant Saint Hall possessed these powers of laws, but they did not know what special abilities they possessed. After all, this was a core secret of the Radiant Saint Hall. It was not something they could learn. It can even recover the stolen lifespan. Powers of laws really can't be measured by common sense. Gray's expression became slightly serious. This was definitely an opponent that he could not afford to be careless with. His defense was not weak to begin with. Even if he used his full strength, he could only leave a scratch on his body. Now that he had the ability to quickly recover, he would be even more difficult to deal with. Then let's start again. A stubborn aura emanated from her body. At this moment, Aurora's aura was more like that of a princess than a princess. The princess with the strongest temperament Gray had ever seen was Glenwy Austin. As the princess of the Jewel Kingdom, she had always been groomed as the next successor to the throne. She had always paid great attention to this aspect of grooming, and her temperament was the strongest among the princesses of the four kingdoms. But at this moment, the woman in front of him exuded the aura of a queen that was even stronger than Glenwy Austin's. Noble, holy, untouchable, awe-inspiring, and inviolable. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Streaks of platinum light pierced towards Gray like spears. At the same time, Aurora was enveloped in platinum light as she charged towards Gray. Whoosh! Gray swung his longsword. A purple light swept out and instantly extinguished all the platinum light. Then, he changed the direction of his longsword and slashed towards the left. It happened to collide with another longsword that was wrapped in platinum light. Clang! The purple longsword and the platinum longsword quickly separated upon contact. At the place where the two collided, a ripple appeared and all matter disappeared. Some were evaporated by the high temperature, while some were weathered into invisible dust under the effect of time. Whoosh! A snow-white battle sword slashed towards Aurora from the side. She twisted her body and dodged it. Then, she continued towards Gray. Her strategy was to dodge and use her speed to avoid Derek's powerful defense. She would not be able to injure Derek even if she attacked with all her might. Clang, clang, clang. The fast-moving Gray and Aurora's weapons clashed one after another. Terrifying ripples appeared one after another, causing all matter in the surroundings to disappear. In the eyes of ordinary people, the traces of destruction left behind were not even comparable to king-level experts. However, only those who truly understood could understand how terrifying these traces of destruction were. The other two from the Radiant Saint Hall were undoubtedly such people. As members of the Radiant Saint Hall, although their realms were suppressed, they still possessed the vision and experience of magic light. They were people who could understand how terrifying this battle was. What power? It can actually vaporize matter. The Saintess is suppressed to the first tier of king level, yet she still possesses such battle prowess. It's simply unimaginable. A woman who was close to 30 years old in white armor looked at Aurora with reverence in her eyes. That guy from the Space-Time Temple is not simple either. Just like the Saintess, he also possesses the power of laws. Under his time ability, matter was weathered into invisible particles. The other person was a brown-haired man in his early 30s. His fists were clenched, and his palms were slightly sweaty. He watched the battle nervously. Although the Saintess had broken free from the attack of the laws of time and recovered to her peak condition, her opponent was also in peak condition. Moreover, He had the assistance of a corpse controller whose battle prowess was comparable to magic light. Crack, crack, crack. After another clash, Gray and Aurora could not help but retreat rapidly. Their feet left huge cracks in the hard, icy ground. In the small area where they clashed, the ice and soil disappeared silently. At their current level, what they pursued was precise control over their power, not the range of their power. If they wanted to, they could instantly send their attacks thousands of meters away. However, that was meaningless. Against opponents of the same level, such scattered attacks could only scratch an itch. Swish! From Aurora's side, Derek attacked her again, but she dodged it again with her speed. Gray naturally would not let a magic light battle prowess go unutilized. He appeared near Derek from time to time and led the battle to Derek's side, creating opportunities for him. Aurora was also very smart. Once she realized that Gray appeared too close to Derek, she would attack Gray from afar. She would not get close to Gray at all. Derek, who only had physical strength, obviously could not attack Aurora, who was extremely fast, and purposely distanced herself. How troublesome! Standing on the cracked ice surface and looking at each other, Gray and Aurora's eyes were filled with seriousness and excitement. As both of them had the power of laws, they had the same level of strength. There was not much difference in their battle prowess. After a long stalemate, neither of them could do anything to the other, which made them wary of each other. And this sort of hardy battle between two people at the same boundary, where neither of them could do anything to the other, caused the two of them to be extremely excited. Defeating or killing such an opponent gave them a much greater sense of accomplishment than killing 10 or even 100 demon lights at once. Swish, swish. Once again, the two of them turned into a purple and platinum radiance as they charged at each other. Their swords clashed once again as they moved at high speed. No, just as the swords were about to collide, Gray's long sword that was wrapped in purple radiance abruptly descended and slashed toward Aurora's waist. At the same time, without Gray's sword blocking her, Aurora's platinum sword also slashed at Gray's chest. Bang! With a muffled sound, the two swords slashed at each other at the same time. Then, the two figures were forced back by each other. The sword with the corrosive power of time slashed open Aurora's armor at her abdomen, leaving a shallow wound on her abdomen. The power of time acted on Aurora again, making her age increase again. The blazing longsword with the rule of light was like a lightsaber, slashing at Gray's black armor at his chest. After a scorching sensation, Gray relied on his black armor and alloy defense to withstand the sword. In terms of defense, it was clear that Gray, who had the black battle armor and the ability to transform into metal, was superior. Bang! Stomping on the ground, the ice surface collapsed and a huge crater appeared. Gray rushed out and pounced at Aurora again like a ferocious tiger released from its cage. Clang, clang, clang. Relying on his powerful defense, Gray only attacked and did not defend. The pressure on Aurora instantly multiplied. After several exchanges, Gray slashed at Aurora again. Bang! Aurora's waist was slashed by Gray's sword. Her armor was cut open, and a cut appeared on her snow-white skin. Her appearance changed again, and she looked like she was close to 40 years old. Splash! Aurora pulled away from Gray and stared at him from afar. Platinum light bloomed on her body, and the wounds on her body and her aged face all disappeared. She returned to her 20-something years old appearance. The power of the laws of time, corpse control, and some sort of strengthening ability. You've really surprised me. Aurora's expression was solemn, but a terrifying aura rose from her body as if a terrifying beast was awakening. A pitch-black, swirl-like imprint of the laws of darkness was activated in her head. As the most valued person in the Radiant Saint Hall, she naturally practiced blood skills. Moreover, she had practiced them for many years already, reaching an extremely high level. As a result, even though her battle prowess was only at the level of magic light, it was still enough to increase her battle prowess drastically. Chapter 615. Staring at Gray, Aurora's amber eyes were filled with killing intent. A platinum-colored lightsaber that looked like it was made of killing intent appeared. There were many black patterns on the surface of a lightsaber. It made the originally bright, platinum-colored lightsaber that was condensed from light look cold and eerie. Darkness and light were two completely opposite powers. However, when they were combined, they would explode with a terrifying power that far surpassed any of them. Swoosh! The platinum-colored lightsaber had a cold aura. It pierced through at a speed faster than lightning and instantly appeared in front of Gray, stabbing toward Gray's heart. Swoosh! Looking at the platinum-colored lightsaber that was condensed from light, Gray's pupils contracted violently. His heart raced due to his nervousness. He sensed danger from the lightsaber. His intuition told him that the lightsaber was extremely dangerous. Even with his strong defense, he would still be in danger when facing the lightsaber. The time rule ability shrouded his entire body. The flow of time around Gray became several times faster than other places. Gray's figure dodged quickly like a bolt of lightning. Puff! The sound of flesh being pierced was clearly heard. The platinum-colored lightsaber was too fast. It was so fast that Gray couldn't dodge it even if he used time acceleration. He only managed to avoid his heart. The platinum-colored lightsaber pierced his left shoulder. The black armor that wasn't damaged at all in the previous battle was finally pierced through by this violent power. The platinum-colored lightsaber pierced straight through and pierced his silver-gray flesh after the alloy transformation. Before the blood could spill, it had already evaporated. Gray's body shot backward like a beam of light. Gray's figure finally came to a stop after crashing for an unknown number of kilometers and leaving a long gully in the icy ground. There was a hole in the shoulder of the black armor. The flesh there seemed to have been dug out forcefully. Blood skill, and it's at least at the second or even the third level. Gnashing his teeth in pain, Gray crawled up from the ground and looked at Aurora with a serious expression. Deep in his blue eyes, there was deep fear. In terms of Blood Fiend's abilities, he was superior to the other party. Not only did he have the ability to control time, but he also had the ability to control corpses, as well as the ability to strengthen his defense. With the support of these three abilities, his overall combat strength was stronger than his opponent's. This was also the reason why he was able to injure his opponent several times in a row. However, in terms of blood skills, he was far inferior to his opponent. Even though he had obtained a 3-star blood skill by chance, it had only been a short time since he had obtained it. Thus, he had only comprehended the first level. It was inevitable that the other party had been in contact with blood skills for a longer period of time than him. After a long period of immersion, the other party's level of understanding of blood skills would definitely surpass his. Whoosh! A platinum light rapidly approached. Within the platinum light, Aurora's beautiful body could be vaguely seen. She was beautiful, holy, and untainted. She stopped about 100 meters away from Gray and stood on top of a hill made of snow. Looking down at Gray, her amber eyes were cold and arrogant. If this is all you've got, you'll definitely die here today. You're too arrogant. Gray snorted. His light blue eyes were cold. Even though there was a difference in their blood skills, it didn't mean that the other party could kill him. Let's see what other surprises you have for me. Aurora's voice was domineering and overbearing. Her blonde hair fluttered in the wind, and her flawless face was cold and arrogant. She was a natural-born princess who was more suitable to be the ruler of a country than the saintess of the sanctuary. Whoosh! Enveloped in platinum light, her body turned into a platinum light and rapidly approached Gray. Her speed was clearly faster than when she fought with Gray earlier. With the use of the blood skill, not only was her combat power increased, but her speed was also increased as well. The increase in her combat power was already difficult enough to deal with, but now that her speed had been increased as well, it was a terrible situation for Gray. Her Highness the Saintess has won. Seeing that Aurora had injured Gray and gained the absolute advantage, the other two people from the Radiant Temple heaved a sigh of relief. The outcome was already decided. Facing the Saintess who had used her blood skills to greatly increase her battle strength and speed, her opponent was no longer able to resist. Being killed was only a matter of time. As for not seeing the Saintess opponent use his blood skills, they were not surprised. Blood skills required comprehension, and it was common for people with poor comprehension to not even be able to reach the entry level of a blood skill. It was obvious that the temporal temple's disciples' comprehension was just barely passable. Sir Grey, Bard, who had luckily escaped with his life, clenched his fists tightly. His palms were sweaty, and his face was filled with nervousness. His voice was filled with worry. The battle between Grey and Aurora was just too fast. It was so fast that even a desolate blood warrior like him could not see it clearly. However, he could still roughly tell that Grey was at a complete disadvantage. Swish! Aurora closed the distance of 100 meters in an instant with her terrifying speed. Her sword was wrapped in platinum light and slashed towards Grey with the terrifying might of her blood skills. This was a terrifying attack. Ripples appeared in the air as if space itself had been torn apart. Before the attack landed on Grey's body, the strong wind was like an invisible sword stabbing into Grey's body. Even though he was wrapped in the power of time and could use it to accelerate, Grey was still unable to dodge in time. He was about to be struck by the sword. At this moment, a figure approached Grey. It was Derek, who had been controlled by Grey's corpse control ability. He grabbed onto Grey's unharmed shoulder with one hand and held it firmly in place like an eagle's claw. Whoosh! The next moment, he grabbed onto Grey and retreated rapidly. Fast, extremely fast, indescribably fast. At this moment, Derek displayed an unimaginable speed that surpassed Grey and Aurora. The speed that Derek displayed at this moment surpassed everyone present. With this speed, he grabbed onto Grey and dodged Aurora's sword, pulling away from Aurora. Pooh! The power that Aurora did not manage to release in time stirred up the air and rolled up invisible wind pressure. An extremely deep ravine appeared and extended extremely long. One cannot see the end of it. However, Grey was completely unharmed. Not even a strand of hair on his body was damaged. You actually have such a move. Aurora looked in shock at Grey, who was completely unharmed by her sword. With just a glance, she had already seen through Grey's move. At this moment, Grey and Derek were shrouded in a layer of purple light. That was the light of time rule ability. It was obvious that Grey had used the time rule ability on the corpse control to increase its movement speed and dodge the attack just now. I've said that you're too arrogant. You can't kill me if you want to. Meeting Aurora's slightly shocked gaze, Grey's eyes were cold. Just like the alloy transformation ability, he had the idea of using the time rule ability on the corpse control for a long time and had even tried it. Unfortunately, the results were not satisfactory. Far away from his time rule ability, it was like a wild and uncontrollable horse, becoming difficult to control. He clearly only wanted to speed up a little, but in an instant, it caused the corpse to age and decay, turning into ashes. This uncontrollable state made it difficult for him to use the time rule ability on the corpse control. At least with his current control of the time rule ability, he was unable to do so. However, this attempt was not completely useless. He realized that the time rule ability near him was controllable. As long as the corpse control was near him, it would be able to gain the same controllable acceleration as him. Relying on this point, he managed to escape from Aurora's extremely dangerous sword attack. I'm indeed surprised that you have such a move. However, you still can't change the fact that your current combat power is far inferior to mine. Aurora snorted coldly. Her amber eyes were filled with a coldness that could freeze a person. In the next moment, beams of golden light condensed and appeared around her. They were like golden long spears, whistling as they pierced towards Grey. Since she was inferior in speed, she would win with numbers. Her combat power was at least a level higher than Grey's. Even if her ability was split, it was enough to cause damage to Grey. Puff! A golden beam of light pierced through, and under Grey's control, Derek quickly retreated. A hole silently appeared where they had been standing just a moment ago. The wall was smooth as if it had been polished. It pierced through the ice layer and went deep into the frozen soil. It was bottomless. No one knew how deep it was. Puff! 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 Beams of platinum light fell from the sky like a rain of arrows, completely enveloping Grey and Derek in the rain of arrows. Whoosh! 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 Under Gray's control, Derek dodged left and right as if he was walking on a tightrope. He narrowly avoided the platinum light beams again and again. There were several times when the white gold light beam brushed past them at close range. Near them, deep holes were densely arranged one after another, like a huge beehive. Fortunately, they both had the ability to walk in the void. Otherwise, they would easily step into the air and fall into the bottomless holes. The sense of danger was constantly chasing after Gray. His nervousness made Gray's forehead covered in fine sweat. Finally, Gray and Derek rushed out of the range of the rain of arrows. Whoosh! Under the purple light, Gray looked coldly at Aurora. With Derek's speed, he appeared in front of Aurora in an instant. Whoosh! At such a close distance, Aurora's perfect face was clearly seen. However, he had no intention of being gentle with her. The longsword wrapped in purple light quickly and accurately slashed toward Aurora's snow-white and slightly rosy throat. Chapter 6:16. Shoo! The purple radiance sword slashed towards her throat. Aurora's pupils dilated rapidly as shock appeared on her beautiful face. Under the blood skills boost, her speed exploded as she quickly dodged to the side. She managed to avoid her throat, but a few strands of her platinum hair were grazed. They withered like flowers and turned into ashes. Anger and fear flashed across Aurora's face. Aurora's long sword wrapped in platinum light pierced towards Gray's throat. Slash! Gray's throat was pierced as if there was no obstruction at all. In fact, there was no obstruction at all because that was just Gray's shadow. The real Gray was grabbed by Derek and appeared on the other side of Aurora. His purple radiance sword made the same movement as Aurora, stabbing down as well. However, this time, he was obstructed because he stabbed right in the middle of Aurora's chest. Puff! Blood dripped down as Aurora's figure kept retreating. Her appearance was also rapidly changing as the time rule power was used on her again. Puff! While being grabbed by Derek, Gray quickly caught up and slashed his purple radiance sword toward Aurora's slender waist. Aurora blocked with her longsword, but Gray's figure dodged again and slashed towards Aurora's left arm from the left. A trace of blood appeared as Aurora's body staggered. Her appearance continued to change. After the change, she had turned into a woman in her 40s. Puff! Gray still didn't intend to let her go. He couldn't give her a chance to breathe. He knew this too well. His figure flashed, and he appeared behind Aurora, slashing his sword on her back. Faint traces of blood appeared as Aurora became older. Her platinum hair had withered like weeds. Although there were still some traces of her youth on her face, it was a fact that she had aged. Shoo! Gray's eyes were terrifyingly cold. He didn't seem to be affected by the fact that a young woman had turned into an old woman. The purple radiance sword once again mercilessly slashed towards the old woman. A young woman in her prime had turned into an old woman. Aurora was so furious that the veins on her forehead bulged. Her voice was filled with extreme anger. As the possessor of the affinity physique, she was hailed as the saintess and was being nurtured as the next successor of Temple. No matter where she went, she would become the focus of everyone. She was the brightest star in the sky. There was no stain in her life, and she had originally thought that she would continue to be like this. Even when facing the holy sons and holy daughters of the various temples, she was confident that she would not be weaker than them. But today her life was stained. Her lifespan was cut off, and she became an old woman. This was a great humiliation, a stain in his life. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. As she roared, a platinum light enveloped her, and all the wounds and debuffs on her body quickly disappeared. That was not all. She seemed to have turned into a white gold sun. The white gold light radiated from her body in all directions. Every ray was extremely hot and filled with terrifying penetrative power. This was an indiscriminate attack, and also the most difficult attack to dodge. Pung, pung, pung. Facing the white gold light that covered all directions, Gray and Derek could no longer dodge. Their bodies were hit by the white gold light, and they were sent flying, smashing through several ice mountains. Thousands of meters away, Gray and Derek, who were in a sorry state, crawled up. Gray was not injured, because at the crucial moment, he had hidden behind Derek and used him as a meat shield to avoid the violent light attacks. Derek's clothes were tattered, but he was also not injured. Just as Gray had guessed, Derek's defense was now even higher than his. The reason for this was because Derek's starting point was too high. His body was originally at the magic light level, and on top of the magic light level, alloy transformation increased his defense. It was easy to imagine how strong he was. Gray's defense was at the first level of the king level. Even if he used alloy transformation and the black armor's defense, he was still weaker than Derek. Crack! The white gold light exploded, and Aurora's figure reappeared. All the negative effects had been healed, whether it was her injuries or the life she had lost. As long as the blood energy was not exhausted, all negative effects could be recovered. The law of light was definitely not weaker than the law of time. This is the first time someone has forced me to this extent. Looking at Gray, the man who brought shame to her, Aurora's eyes were spitting fire. She gritted her teeth so hard that creaking sounds could be heard. At this moment, her perfect face was no longer perfect due to her angry expression, but there was a different kind of charm to it. Just like the words of a certain noble who loved women, a beautiful woman was beautiful even when she was angry. Glancing at Gray, she found that although Gray was in a sorry state, he was not injured by the attack just now. Her eyes narrowed imperceptibly, and she took a deep breath, forcefully suppressing her anger. I'll remember this. Whoosh! Shrouded in white gold light, she quickly appeared beside the other two people from the Radiant St. Hall, grabbing one of them with each hand as she rushed toward the barrier. Those who descended for the first time would have their realms suppressed. Before their realms recovered, they would not be able to break through the barrier and leave this realm. However, she was not an exception. Even if her realms were suppressed, she still had the strength to break through the barrier. You want to run? Gray's face was filled with cold killing intent as Derek quickly chased after the other party. Although the other party's special ability to recover negative effects was very bug-like, it was not unbreakable. The blood energy was the other party's greatest weakness. Furthermore, the other party was in the state of using the blood skill, so the blood energy would not last long. As long as the other party's blood energy was exhausted, the other party's unbreakable ability would be broken. The other party clearly understood this. Seeing that the blood skill could not kill him, she decisively retreated. Whoosh! Under the effect of time acceleration, Derek's speed was naturally faster than Aurora's. The distance between Gray and Derek was getting closer and closer. You won't be able to stop me if I want to leave. Aurora turned around with a cold expression, her voice cold. A large number of golden light beams appeared, densely packed, and suddenly whistled out, attacking Gray and Derek. Whoosh! 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 Gray and Derek dodged left and right, finally breaking out of the encirclement of the golden light beams and chasing after the other three. Whoosh! 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 However, not long after they started chasing, large amounts of golden light beams came again, blocking Gray and Derek. This repeated several times. When Gray and Derek finally broke out of the encirclement of the golden light beams, Aurora and the other two had already appeared beside the barrier. Standing in front of the barrier, a golden light beam pierced through the barrier. A hole with a diameter of 2 to 3 meters appeared on the barrier. In front of the hole, Aurora turned back and looked coldly at Gray. Her golden hair danced in the wind, her beautiful appearance, and her amber eyes seemed to want to imprint Gray deeply in her mind. Of course, this was not a good thing. She then jumped in and entered the other side of the origin world through the hole. She's escaped. Gray's brows furrowed slightly. He stopped his pursuit and didn't continue. Let alone the experts of the Radiant St. Hall on the other side of the barrier, he was not even that woman's opponent. The reason why he could force the woman to flee was because her cultivation was suppressed in this realm. He had a territorial advantage. Once they returned to the origin world, the woman's suppressed cultivation would definitely recover. He definitely would not be her opponent once her cultivation recovered. She should be the Radiant Saint, right? The woman's appearance had truly exceeded Gray's expectations. Although he had learned from interrogations that the Radiant Saint Hall had a saint among the younger generation who grasped the laws of light, he had never thought that she would actually take the risk to enter this realm. Grasping the power of laws meant that she had already obtained an opportunity to reach the realm of laws. The various temples would always protect geniuses like that. However, he had never thought that they would actually take the risk of sending her into this realm. He had almost lost control over her. Fortunately, there was only one such terrifying young person in the Radiant Saint Hall. Although there were other people who grasped the laws of light, their cultivation had far surpassed the first layer of magic light. They were unable to pass through the barrier and enter this realm. Although she's escaped, it's definitely not without benefits. At the very least, the news of what happened in this realm is related to the space-time temple will be leaked. Gray supported his chin with one hand as he pondered. The reason why he did not deny the space-time temple's identity was to mislead the Radiant Saint Hall into thinking that everything that had happened in this realm was the work of the space-time temple. That way, the Radiant Saint Hall's attention would shift to the space-time temple, and they would pay less attention to this realm. After all, the space-time temple had already visited this realm. It was obvious that the magic weapon had already fallen into the hands of the higher-ups of the space-time temple. It would be best if they could withdraw the people stationed outside the barrier because of this. Even if they did not withdraw all of them, it would still be good if they could withdraw their experts. Once his cultivation reached a higher level, he should be able to break through the seal with the power of the laws of time. In order to break through the seal of the Radiant Saint Hall, Gray had racked his brains. The only thing that made him feel slightly guilty was that he had let the space-time temple take the blame. However, the Space-Time Temple was a temple organization just like the Radiant Saint Hall. They were definitely extremely powerful. Even if they were targeted by the Radiant Saint Hall, it should not affect them too much. Moreover, Gray could clearly tell from the words of that holy maiden that the relationship between the Radiant Saint Hall and the Space-Time Temple was not good. Ruining the Radiant Saint Hall's plans would definitely benefit the Space-Time Temple. It could be said that he had done the Space-Time Temple a favor. His guilt immediately lessened. Chapter 617. In the Radiant Temple, the leader of the Radiant Saint Hall, Alex Bader, sat on the throne. There were 6 seats to his left and right, where the 12 most powerful people below the leader sat. Some of them were vice leaders, while others were elders. Hall Master, elders. A young woman in a white dress stood in the middle of the hall. She bowed slightly to the leader and the 12 most powerful people. The woman had long platinum hair, a flawless face, a slender waist, and a curvy figure. She was the holy maiden of the Radiant Temple, Aurora. The leader of the Radiant Temple, Alex Bader, looked at the woman with a doting gaze as he spoke gently. Aurora, tell me about your experiences in that plane. There were countless organizations in the Source world. Organizations were born and destroyed almost every day, but generally speaking, there were 2 types of organizations. The first type was organizations that had no blood relations with each other. The second type was organizations that had blood relations with each other in the form of clans. The Radiant Temple was naturally the first type of organization. In this type of organization, the outstanding disciples were equivalent to the direct descendants of the clan. They had a noble status and were highly valued by the upper echelons. Aurora, who had an affinity with laws, was clearly such an outstanding disciple. Yes, Aurora nodded and told him about her experience in that plane. Unknowingly, that man's face appeared in her mind. Anger and awe flashed through her mind. She was angry at her miserable defeat this time, but she was in awe of her opponent's strength. She would never belittle her opponent on purpose, because that was the behavior of a fool. Facing her opponent head-on and surpassing her opponent was the reaction of a smart person. It really is the Space-Time Temple behind this, a middle-aged woman said. She wore a purple dress made from the softened leather of a disaster-grade blood beast comparable to a warrior of destruction. Her figure was voluptuous, and her every move was filled with charm. Her name was Deborah Shimei, one of the 4 female elders of the Radiant Temple. Although she was a woman, her battle prowess ranked at the top among the 12 people below the leader. It seems that the space-time temple has obtained the sacred rule artifact. However, from the fact that that plane still exists, the space-time temple hasn't performed the final blood sacrifice to completely repair the sacred rule artifact. A middle-aged man with a brown beard and an old-fashioned face said, "Hypocrite, the space-time temple is still so hypocritical." A skinny man with frightening green eyes sneered. Back then, it was the space-time temple that led the destruction of the sacred Sun Temple. In that battle, dozens of planes were destroyed. Who knows how many people died? Right now, the most important thing is to find a way to take back that lost Saint artifact from the space-time temple and carry out the final blood sacrifice. The silver-haired old man with a face as red as a baby said, "Now that it has fallen into the hands of the temporal temple, it will be very difficult to snatch it back. The only fortunate thing is that the temporal temple did not perform the final blood sacrifice. Even if they did obtain it, it would not increase the temporal temple's combat power by much." A middle-aged man with short black hair was rubbing the stubble on his chin with his index finger and thumb. "What I'm worried about is that Junior from the space-time temple who was able to gain the upper hand against Aurora. Not only does he possess the law of time, but he also has the ability to control corpses and strengthen his body. After many years, the space-time temple will definitely give birth to a powerful character. I have to find a way to get rid of that Junior." The skinny man's green eyes glowed with a cold light. "And this time, we have to make the space-time temple pay a price. I suggest that we attack their important resource points." "I agree." In the hall, many people voiced their agreement with anger in their eyes. In order to repair that lost Saint artifact, they had planned for 1,000 years, and that did not include the time they had spent searching for a suitable plane. However, because of the space-time temple, all their efforts had been in vain. This anger had to be vented. "Let's do it." The temple master of the Radiant Temple, Alex Bader, made the final decision. As a result, the conflict between the two colossal forces caused by Gray was decided. "How should we deal with that plane?" The young woman in a red dress asked. "Continue to be stationed there. That plane must be in our hands. After all, if we want to take back the lost Saint artifact, we will still need to use that plane. However, the level of the garrison will be lowered by 1, and the main force will be transferred back." The shopkeeper of the Radiant Temple, Alex Bader, said after some thought. The corpses were too badly damaged. Even with the ability to revive, Gray was unable to revive the people he had killed. Moreover, what had happened today had reminded Gray that even with Derek stationed there, it was not absolutely safe. After sending a new group of people, not only did Gray station the Ice Soul King Beast here, but he also planned to station himself here often. The Holy Maiden of the Radiant Temple was just too powerful. Only by working together with Derek could they barely defeat her. After suffering a defeat, she probably would not come again. However, it was better to be safe than sorry, so he decided to station himself here. Time passed unknowingly, and Gray was already 25 years old. Just a few days ago, he had celebrated his 25th birthday. During this period of time, Gray's cultivation had naturally reached the second layer of the King Realm, and he had made further progress. He had already consumed the blood of the Ice-Fire Demon Ape and the Wind Demon Fox, raising the 5 bloodlines that formed the laws of time to the Magic Light level. "Has anyone from the Radiant Temple come in the past year?" Gray and Sophia walked hand in hand in a city that had a long history but was rather prosperous. They brushed past the hurried pedestrians, as if they were a pair of very ordinary lovers. This was one of the cities in Gray's Duke's fief. After being sealed, Gray rarely appeared in his fief. Everything in the fief was taken care of by someone else. This time, Sophia had come to Fergus Castle to attend Gray's birthday banquet. After the banquet, the two of them decided to go sightseeing and relax together. After some discussion, they finally decided to go to Gray's Duke's fief and inspect the situation inside while they were at it. No, ever since the Holy Maiden of the Radiant Temple came last time, no one else has come. Gray shook his head. He suspected that this situation had something to do with how he had led the trouble to someone else. However, he did not dare to break through the planar barrier and go to the other side to verify this. After all, if the Radiant Temple really had people stationed there, they would definitely be much more powerful than him. Is the Holy Maiden of the Radiant Temple really that powerful? So powerful that even you only won by a narrow margin? Sophia turned her head to the side and looked at Gray. Her black, gem-like eyes were filled with curiosity. She wore a long, blue dress. Her beautiful, violet hair hung to her waist. She only wore simple gemstone hair accessories. It was simple and exquisite, perfectly displaying her cold bearing. She had a firm chest, a slender waist, slender legs, and an egg-shaped face. Her beauty definitely did not pale in comparison to the Holy Maiden of the Radiant Saint Hall. It was just that the two women's beauty leaned towards different directions. The Saint of Light's beauty leaned towards being otherworldly and untainted by dust, while Sophia's beauty leaned towards being cool and elegant, just like a purple violet. Even in the boundless origin world, the Radiant Temple is a peak organization. I can't underestimate the successor of an organization like that. There was a hint of caution in Gray's expression, and in my battle with her, I couldn't say that I defeated her. If it weren't for the fact that her cultivation was suppressed, I definitely wouldn't have been her opponent. I think her cultivation should be at the first layer of magic light. She's reached the first layer of magic light at such a young age. Is her talent that much greater than ours? Sophia raised an eyebrow. Her talent might not necessarily be greater than ours. Gray shook his head. It's mainly the cultivation environment. Last time, when I interrogated the fifth organization, I learned from them that even without any supplementary medicine, cultivation in the origin world is several times faster than on this plane. Several times? Sophia was surprised. Just how terrifying was the speed of cultivation if it was several times faster? No wonder the Holy Maiden of the Radiant Temple was so much more powerful than them. Yeah, this seems to involve the plane origin. The more abundant the plane origin is, the more beneficial the environment is for cultivation, and the faster the speed of cultivation will be. With the size of the origin world, the plane origin must be extremely vast and abundant. Gray explained, I didn't expect the origin world to have such benefits. If I go to the origin world, I'm afraid it won't take long for me to reach the King Realm. Unfortunately, there's such a powerful organization outside the plane. If you want to leave this plane, even you'll find it very difficult. Sophia sighed slightly. It is indeed very difficult. Gray nodded solemnly. According to his estimation, before he reached the level of magic light, he definitely wouldn't be a match for the people guarding the plane outside. Fortunately, his time ability could break through the plane's origin formation and remove the restriction on cultivation. He wouldn't be stuck at the third metamorphosis and could reach the level of magic light. However, reaching the level of magic light should be the limit of his cultivation in this plane. After all, he didn't have the blood of a disaster-grade blood beast after reaching the level of magic light, so he couldn't possess the blood of a disaster-grade blood beast. When the time came, he would have to take the risk and see if he could break through the Radiant Temple's blockade and enter the origin world. Poof! As the two of them walked, a strange situation suddenly occurred. On the streets, the pedestrians were still shuttling back and forth, and the carriages were still moving. However, in their ears, they could not hear the slightest bit of sound. All sound had already disappeared from their ears. Pedestrians and carriages passed by them, but they passed by them like illusions. They didn't feel like they had been hit at all. Gray and Sophia glanced at each other. They already knew what was happening to them. The ghost merchant. They couldn't be more familiar with such a commotion. Gray had already experienced it twice. It was precisely the commotion caused by the appearance of the ghost merchant.